hide nothing from the masses of the people. Tell no lies. Expose lies whenever they are told. Mask no difficulties, mistakes, failures. Claim no easy victory.
Very, very pleasant morning to you. Good morning, wherever you are in Jamaica and the world. Very, very pleasant morning to you. You're inside of the Africa Forum, Running African. Reuniting the African family for development. That is our vision. Reuniting the African family for development. Blazing new paths towards Africa's rendezvous with destiny. We're bearing witness. We're demanding change. Crafting an African-centered agenda for change and development. Good morning to you. Good morning to you on the 107s, 107.1, all the way to 107.9. Good morning to you. Morning to you on the internet at iriafm.net. And on your Blackberries, on your Android apps, good morning, good morning. Ankujar Seneb, Life, Prosperity, Health. Indamen Adu, good morning. Tenastile. How are you doing this morning? And as we say in Swahili, Jambo wote. Jambo wote. How are you doing? We've got an interesting program lined up for you this morning as usual. My name is Kabo Maat Keru. My broadcast assistant this morning is Kishima Francis. We're going through until 10 o'clock. That's when the big A comes in with a Sunday sunshine. And do we have an interesting program lined up for you this morning? "100 years of Garveyism. 100 years of Garveyism. 100 years of Garveyism. Breaking the shackles of mental control." The focus as we kick things into higher gear. The beginning or the first week, the first Sunday of July, Sunday, July 6, 2014. Kicking things into higher gear. Since January, we have been focusing on 100 years of Mwalimu Marcus Messiah Garvey. And this is a morning when we kind of changed gears a bit, but it's a higher gear that we're engaging. So as we continue our vision of reuniting the African family for development, unity is the ultimate goal. Unity among black African people is the only solution. And as we think of and observe and celebrate Mwalimu Marcus Messiah Garvey, among black African people we say this is our final chance for unity. If we fail in the centenary of Mwalimu Marcus Messiah Garvey, then we fail. We fail, and we likely fail forever. This is a moment when we say, let us put aside our differences. This is a moment when we say, among ourselves as black African people, let us start right here before we begin to start talking about unity anywhere else. Let us do this in the 100th year of Mwalimu Marcus Messiah Garvey. So regardless of what you brand yourself or call yourself or the title that you go by as black African people, we say unity in the 100th year of Mwalimu Marcus Messiah Garvey is the only solution for the black African race. So whether you call yourself Pan-Africans, Whether you call yourself Pan-Africanists, because there's a distinction there also, while we are splintered. Whether you call yourself African-centered, whether you call yourself UNIA, whether you call yourself UAIA, whether you call yourself Rastafarian, whether you call yourself Rastafarian, whether you call yourself Rastafari, because there is a splintering there also. This is the time. The time is now. In the 100th year of Mwalimu Marcus Messiah Garvey, the time is now. Let us do this, people. If we fail, breaking the shackles of mental control, if we fail in the 100th year, whether you call yourself a scholar, an academic, a black scholar, or a black academic, this is the time for black African people to unite. Let us come together around that which is important for unity, is important for progress. Let us do this. Put aside the titles, put aside the names that we give ourselves, and talk a moment, even with those labels, about unity, about how we go forward. So you're inside of the Africa Forum. It is Running African, and we go through until 10. And as I said before, do we have an interesting program lined up for you? By the way, we do know that we're having some issues in parts of Jamaica that you're not picking us up right now, but we know that. We're working on that, and that will be cleared up shortly, very, very soon. So as we say, Anko Jasenep, life, prosperity, health. A quick look at what we've got coming up this morning inside of the program. 100 years of Mwalimu Marcus Messiah Garvey, breaking the shackles of mental control. Our main interview this morning comes up at 7:30, and we're very, very happy, very pleased and very happy to welcome to the space, to the black space. Good morning, Nana Broadbar. To welcome to the space this morning, activists. Earlier we told you that we have been talking to the Pan-African elder and scholar, Dr. Nathan Hare, formerly of San Francisco University. He still has his private practice in San Francisco as a psychologist, and his wife, Dr. Julia Hare, you'll recall, also an academic and a scholar, two of the leading Pan-Africanists, Black Power couple in the Pan-African community. Dr. Julia Hare, in recent times, though, has not been doing so well, and so we were very shocked to hear that from Dr. Nathan Hare just these few weeks. What I want to do now is to remind ourselves a little bit of the powerhouse that is Dr. Julia Hare. So a little bit from Dr. Julia Hare. And this she did at the Black Think Tank, by the way, a few years ago.
But on a serious note, to the extent that black relationships have survived as they have, what say you about that 400 years later?
It is amazing that black relationships have lasted for 400 years. They lasted this morning. They're also going to last tonight, and you may not even know the person to whom you're going to have the relationship with. But they do tend to go over. Relationships do go over like that. And as we move into what has happened to this, I know that our relationships sometimes really reach a low ebb. That's one of the reasons why we wrote the book, How to Find and Keep a BMW, a Black Man Working. It was spelled out in there. This is very serious. Because our relationships didn't start yesterday or last week. It also started 400 years ago when those 19 persons were here. And I want you to remember something very important that one of our by any means necessary power brokers told us, and that was Malcolm X. He said, if we can only remember that you didn't land at Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on you. And it's very essential that we kind of keep this in place. And knowing that these are the things that happen, then we have to move more to change it. See, we have a system that would not like to see black males and black females together. They would not like to see that happening at all. Because once we come together, they understand the power of the strength of the black woman, the queen of the universe. They know that, her strength. They also know the power of the black male, the warrior. If you would turn him loose, he will protect also his family and things that need to be done. And because they understand that if our relationships are together, then they will lose. But if our relationships are torn up, then we can forever be treated in certain ways by the oppressors. That's why they gave us something called integration, which is nothing but the illusion of inclusion. They gave us this. Actually gave that statement. And when they gave that statement, it meant that they could go right into your homes. They went into the black homes now, the powers that be, and told us that you cannot discipline your children anymore. And if you discipline your children, you will go into jail. It's this kind of thing they told us. Now, this is amazing that, you know, the black parents who in Africa, that was out of the question. Some social worker come in there saying you can't discipline your children, the social worker would disappear. As you all know, this kind of thing would go on. You would be sitting in a place like this, and all you had to do was act up and do something wrong, and all your mother had to do was to glance in your direction. Y'all remember that? And you remember that the glance meant, don't let me have to get up and come over there. And every once in a while in the black family, there was a fool who would challenge the glance. And if you could get home over the foot, over the ironing cord, over whatever, you were sent to the backyard to get something off the peach tree. And if you brought something in that was too short, God forbid that you would do something like that. But then it got so terrible in frightening us. This is why we got to take this back. And this is the best part of our action plan, is to reclaim the minds of our children. Because then they went into the public schools and took discipline out of there. So when we acted up in there, they put our boys, our black men, into something called special ed classes. As you know, those special ed classes are nothing but holding cells until they can go to the state prison. But this is what they did. And then, the one thing that they knew, that if we can put them in prison, if we can have them convicted for a felony, then once they get out of prison, they cannot get a job because of that. They cannot get the job. And then if they happen to eke out and find a job, then they have to pay taxes on a job, yet they cannot vote. And I call that taxation without representation. That's what we're looking at. And if one of the things that we would learn to do, they did a grand thing when they took that discipline away from us, because when they made our parents afraid to discipline the children, then what happened? We found out that the teachers were afraid of the principals were scared of the superintendent was scared of the school board was scared of the parents were scared of the children, and the children ain't scared of nobody. The reason why we're so pleased to have the covenant, it makes all of this type foolishness stop. It's going on under Angela Glover in San Francisco. It's all over the country. And they're all saying we finally have a movement where we can take back over the minds of our children. And the first thing we got to take over, the covenant taught us that we do not have to have black leaders anymore. told us because everyone in this room is empowered to be a black leader. Everyone in this room. Because see, right now, these people that you're calling black leaders are not what they used to be with Marcus Garvey's day. They're not what they used to be back in the days of W.E.B. Du Bois or Martin Luther King. Those were the people that got us together and planted a strategy, and we're not looking for fame. But today's black leaders, I'm afraid, have become leading blacks. And don't ever confuse leading blacks with black leaders. You don't confuse them. Black leaders are chosen by you. They're chosen by the people they're going to lead. They're chosen by us. But let me tell you about the leading blacks. The leading blacks are chosen by the media. Leading blacks are chosen by ABC, all broadcasting Caucasians.
Should I stop her or let her go?
Now this is the last one. Leading blacks are also chosen by NBC. Nothing broadcasting but Caucasians. And the rest are chosen by CBS. The Caucasian broadcasting system. And when you allow leaders to be chosen by the media that's owned by the corporations, when you get ready to change your lives, when you get ready to demonstrate, when you get ready to march, when you get ready to come to the covenant, when you get ready to endorse and make Tavis one of our next elected officials, well, what happens? Take the time to carefully watch and see what the leading blacks are doing, because that's when the leading blacks sneak into the door to the corporations, and they will tell the corporations, oh, we know how to go and put them down. We know how to get you some real affirmative action Negroes to come in here and work. We know how to do that. But at the end of the day, the leading blacks lead the corporations, and the leading blacks have gotten paid while we have gotten played.
Blacks are getting paid while we have gotten played. Uncompromising, unapologetic, irreverent, to the point. Our sister, Dr. Julia Hare, our sister elder, Dr. Julia Hare, she was named one of the 100 most influential African Americans a few years ago. An academic and a scholar, but also in a very serious way, a Pan-Africanist, understanding her role in Pan-Africanism. Also, her husband, Dr. Nathan Hare, a powerhouse couple, as we have said before. And Dr. Julia Hare, our hearts to her and our prayers. Also, she has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I was told by Dr. Nathan Hare just recently, and it made me really sad and really think about her seriously. We were trying to get them to come into Jamaica, actually, and found out, by the way, that this is what was happening with our elders. Well, Dr. Nathan Hare, a father to many Pan-African scholars, many, and Dr. Julia Hare, a mother to thousands and thousands, and a mentor to so many, including Dr. Oba T Shaka. And when I spoke to Dr. Nathan here about some of the issues we were having in this 100th year of Mwalimu Marcus Garvey, and for want of a better word, the fight from our own black brothers and sisters on the ground whenever we try to organize, he stood up immediately, strongly, and said, listen, I'm giving you my brother, Dr. Oba T Shaka. Call him now. He's going to come. And Dr. Oba T Shaka, of course, will be here with his wife on 4 August 17 to talk about 100 years. On 4 August 17 to talk about 100 years of Mwalimu Marcus Garvey breaking the shackles of mental control. As the sound of Papa Wemba and Kofi Olamide. By the way, we are going to be going to the phone lines shortly to speak with our brother Dr. Wazir Mohammed as we once again stop to pay attention to the ongoing Commission of Inquiry into the assassination of Dr. Walter Rodney. You can follow me on Twitter at Kabu, K-A-B-U, Ma'at Keru. That's Kabu, Ma'at Keru, K-A-B-U-M-A-A-T, K-H-E-R-U, Kabu, Ma'at Keru. You can check us out on Facebook also at Running African, the IRFM Forum, Running African, the IRFM Forum, our Facebook page, or you can follow me at Kabu. On Thursday, the report came out that from the Associated Press that a Dutch court has ruled that Black Pete is negative stereotype. Later on this morning, Professor Vereen Shepard will be joining me on the phone lines to talk about that. She has been very vocal about this. Black Pete in the Netherlands. By the way, Aldith Hunker, my sister, I know that you are listening online at the moment. We would want to link with you too. Just a quick link if we can later on this morning. So DM me, please, the contact that we can link with you at, just to get your response of this and to say how the Netherlands, Holland, is actually responding to this ruling from the court. As a journalist yourself, I'm sure you've got your fingers on the pulse of this. So DM me the contact numbers or Kishimo, and we'll get back to you. All right, going to be going to the phone lines right on. Dr. Wazir Mohammed, of course, is a member of the Justice for Walter Rodney Committee and also associate of Walter Rodney. Dr. Wazir Mohammed, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us on the phone lines this morning.
Good morning.
All right, good to have you with us again. You have been following this very, very closely, the ongoing Commission of Inquiry into the assassination of Walter Rodney. It's been a while since we've stopped to look closely at this within this space. And so if you could bring us up to date with some of those persons who have actually testified, some of the witnesses, and also to look at what for you has been some of the flashpoints of the high points so far in the Commission of Inquiry.
It will be difficult for me to speak to all the flashpoints so far. The Commission of Inquiry has now completed its third session of hearings. In the first session, you would recall that the police chief, the client chief, came on the stand and spent a couple of minutes because he was unprepared. He came there and reported that 7 of the 10 files that the police had kept on Walter Rodney was missing. And the commission sent him back to find those files and to do more research. And he's still to come back to the stand. But a lot has happened because the commission has met 3 times and has taken a lot of evidence. In the last session, in the second session, for instance, veteran political activist and a colleague of Walter Rodney, Pan-Africanist Yusi Kwayana, testified and give background on the context within which the assassination took place, the political climate, the nature of control that the ruling party and Prime Minister Burnham had given himself over Guyana at the time, yes, and the way in which the police was carrying out repression against the right to life in Guyana, especially repression against protesters at the time. So one of the characterization of the period had to do with the fact that by that time, by 1976, 77, 78, in Guyana, there was at least one military personnel, one person carrying arms, representing the state to every 37 persons, every 37 civilians in the country, which brought out the kind of militarization of the climate in that period.
Yes.
In the third session of the inquiry, the commission, what is emerging is that the evidence, because so much time has elapsed, the evidence is being pieced together, people are coming forward. For instance, in the second and third session, a policeman who was recruited and who as a double agent to infiltrate the WPA, and its leadership came forward to say that and how he was close to Dr. Rupnarayan. He came forward and gave evidence about a plot which he was asked to carry out to assassinate Dr. Rupert Rupnarayan, who was also a leader of the WPA.
Yes.
So these are the kinds of evidence in that session and in this session. What came out is that the pilot, the Guyana Defense Force pilot, working in the air wing of the Guyana Defense Force, came out and gave evidence of having flown a person who he recognized as the person who looked like the assassin, who he had transported to a remote area in an army plane the morning after Walter Rodney was assassinated. So this kind of evidence is coming out as the inquiry unfolds. To come in the inquiry to give evidence would be Donald Rodney, Walter Rodney's brother, who was in the car with him on the night he was killed. His evidence is crucial. We should recall that Donald Rodney was actually charged. Rather than the state going after Gregory Smith, who Donald Rodney had fingered, they charged Donald Rodney. And so he is yet to come on the stand. Dr. Rupnarayan himself, who was one of the closest colleagues of Walter Rodney, will come on the stand. The former crime chief is to come on the stand, and the head of the army. The next session of the inquiry begins again on July 28th and will go until August 8th.
All right, and of course, we had heard last time that this is the Commission of Inquiry could go into next year, and that is how we're looking at it still.
The question of time, the Commission of Inquiry was first of all given a 6-month time period legally.
Yes.
That period had to be extended by a further 3 months. That period will expire in September. It is likely that will have to be extended again, because I can see from where I'm sitting that the Commission of Inquiry will be able to conclude in the time allotted. In fact, witnesses who have given evidence in chief at the first session is yet to be cross-examined. Witnesses who give evidence in chief in the second session is still being cross-examined, and others are yet to be cross-examined. Because the cross-examination is done by lawyers representing the Rodney family, lawyers representing the WPA, lawyers representing the Trade Union Congress in Guyana, lawyers representing the People's National Congress. And so the sessions are going over time, and witnesses are on the stand for a very long time.
All right. Are we any closer, and I know it's early days yet considering what is left to come, but Smith, always a central figure in the assassination of Dr. Walter Rodney. Are we any closer to actually underscoring that, to saying definitively, yes, here was a central player, this was a central figure, and he must, We've always felt this way, but now in this commission, we are finding out more and more about how important he was in the assassination of Walter Rodney.
So he is featured throughout this inquiry. The book that his sister has written is being used in the inquiry because it is absent. But his words purportedly written by his sister is being examined, and that will continue because the inquiry, while it is actually addressing the question of the crime itself, it is concentrating also on the character, the nature, the political climate in the country within which this crime was committed. And so, yes, I mean, all this searching for evidence and the examination of evidence is coming out. But remember, we have to remember that a lot of this evidence has to do with hearsay, people who were present, people can come and testify. But there's also evidence that is brought forward from the newspapers of the period. For instance, the Caribbean Contact, the newspaper of the Caribbean Conference of Churches, the newspaper of the Catholic Standard, is featuring heavily because, remember, there was no real press freedom in Guyana. And so there was a reliance on newspapers outside of Guyana, and those that were operating marginally inside of Guyana was important. And so the information that was contained in those newspapers are now coming out and being part of the process. One of the telling things that came out in the last session, for instance, was the whole discussion on the development of what is called party paramountcy in the country, where the ruling party had complete control. And one of the telling pieces of information that came out was the fact that the PNC flag, the party flag, not the national flag, but the party flag was flying side by side over the Court of Appeal in Guyana in that period, which brings out the nature of political control of the state. So all of this is playing into the process. Because what is coming out is the way in which political opposition was being repressed. Voices that were democratic voices were being suppressed. And it is in that context that Walter Rodney was killed. To drown out the growing chorus of voices against undemocratic rule.
And so that it is critical that this comes out within the commission or through the commission that there was this repression of other voices, political voices in Guyana. It is difficult, it is important that that comes out, critical that comes out.
It is critical because the nature of the political state, the nature of the state is important. We can remember the Morris Bishop, the overthrow of in Grenada in 1979. I mean, the people overthrew the state because of the nature of the state, because of the repression that the state was carrying out against the population. And so the nature of the spontaneous rebellion that was developing in Guyana, within which Walter Rodney was killed, becomes important.
How does this link back to the terms of reference that the Commission has?
Yes, because the terms of reference has asked the Commission to examine the climate in that period, the political climate in that period that led up to the assassination. So that falls within the ambit of the terms of reference.
I know that there have been attempts to sully the name of Walter Rodney and to make him out to be, by some, to be a killer, somebody who had guns and so on, which was what we were told earlier. That's what the Guyanese government, the Burnham government, had said anyway, why he was killed. How damaging has that been, if so?
I don't think that is damaging in any in any struggle, there is some mess, yeah?
Yes.
And I mean, those are the questions that the inquiry, that the commissioners will have to ponder as they look at all the evidence that comes before them on what the WPA was doing, what Walter Rodney was engaged in, the evidence from the police, and that is why the coming to the stand of the crime chief is important. That is why the coming to the stand of the head of the army is important. I mean, who gave the orders for the plane to fly, to take graduates out of the country, for instance?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those are the kinds of stuff that needs to be fleshed out by the commission, and the commission will have to judge these things within the context of what what they've been given mandate to examine in the inquiry.
Right. Yes, go ahead.
I mean, from where we stand, we don't think that any of this is damaging.
Mm-hmm. And so that in terms of Smith himself figured prominently in the inquiry so far, is there a line pointing from Smith to the Burnham government, as you noted just now? This is important for the political climate to be interrogated, but also that, the feeling and the knowledge among many was that this was an assassination by the government of the day. Do we see that line developing, pointing back through the inquiry to the government of a day?
Well, we see witnesses coming forward to bring evidence to say, look, yes, I was a policeman. I was given X orders to infiltrate the WPA. These are the people who gave me these orders. These were the orders. Yes, I knew Smith. I met with Smith. The two of us compared notes. All of that has come out in the inquiry, which is pointing to some official collusion in terms of infiltration, in terms of giving orders on what to do. But these are issues that the Commission will have to weigh as they receive this evidence, and they will have to decide on how they're going to deal with this evidence that is now coming before them.
Yes.
I mean, so long has elapsed, and so, I mean, it is likely that more people probably will come forward. We don't know yet who else will come forward to give this kind of evidence, but this is the kind of trend that is developing in the evidence that is coming out before the Commission. That there were some orders that were coming down to especially people within the security forces to infiltrate, to become agents, to go in, to befriend people, and stuff like that. And that is an important. Those are important pieces of evidence from our standpoint that speaks to the character of the period, the character of nature of the state, the role of policing agencies, and what they were doing. One of the pieces of evidence that was brought before the Commission in this last sitting, for instance, was brought to the Commission by Professor Nigel Westmouth, who was also an activist and on whose life there was an attempt in 1929.
And so our listeners know who was also on this program just a few weeks ago, talking about the inquiry.
Because his life was in jeopardy, and he was attacked, and he brought to the Commission a document which is called the Recognition Handbook, which identified key WPA activists. The pictures give bios of them, which was in circulation at the time, which fingered the people who the security forces should be paying attention to. But this is the kind of material that is coming before the process, which becomes important, which speaks to the character, the nature of the times, the nature of repression, I mean, the evidence that is coming forward, it has to do with the number of times people have been arrested, charged, tortured. For instance, the tortures in the treason trial, in the the number of people who were arrested across the country, why people are arrested, the enforcement of the National Security Act, people being arrested just for being in possession of the party's newspaper, Day Clean, and stuff like that. All that kind of evidence. In fact, one piece of evidence that came out in this last session was in 1980, where a group of WPA activists had gone into a community to mobilize a rally, and the bridge leading to that community from the public road was removed, so that group could not leave that community, and then they were taken hold of and harassed and beaten, stuff like that. And this is the kind of nature of the period that's coming out, that the repression that was taking place, not only against WPA leaders like Walter Rodney and other activists of the WPA, but on ordinary people in little far-flung communities across the country.
All right. Dr. Wazir Mohammed, I'm going to ask you to hold the line for us while we take a very, very quick break and come back. And on the phone lines, Dr. Wazir Mohammed. We're looking at the Walter Rodney Commission of Inquiry underway in Guyana. They've been doing this in different sessions, Dr. Wazir Mohammed. 2 sessions now. The second session has just wrapped. Right. And then they will resume it on July 28th?
They're resuming on July 28th. Will go until August 8th in that session. And then, they then will set dates for future hearings as they go along.
All right.
Because the commission is headed by Barbadian Queen's Counsel, Sir Richard Cheltenham, and it has on it Jamaican attorney Jacqueline Samuels Brown and Trinidad attorney Sinat Jairam.
All right. In terms of a Justice for Walter Rodney committee, last when we spoke with Professor Nigel Westmarcy, he was clear that so far, in terms of how Walter Rodney was being presented and represented, that so far there was no damage as such done to his image, his character through the process. Where does the committee stand now on that? Are you still you're closely following this? What are your feelings on this in terms of justice for Rodney?
Well, I think that's what is coming out, and we always knew and felt that Walter Rodney's character as a people's person, as a person who was closest to the working people, is coming out. His approach of fighting, struggling, writing in defense of ordinary people and their condition, that is coming out in the inquiry. And as we believe, as the inquiry continues to unfold, his activism, not only in Guyana, but in Jamaica, in the U.S., in different parts of the world, in Africa, will continue to unfold as a person who has stood on the side of the working people. And so that's the character and nature of Walter Rodney as a people's fighter is coming out in this inquiry in a real and big way. So we're not concerned so much about damage to his character, because his life is an open book.
Yes.
And has always been. And so, we're looking at this inquiry very closely. We pay close attention to it. And we invite others to continue to pay close attention to it. The inquiry can be viewed live on NCNGuyana.com, National Communication Network of Guyana.com, It begins at 9:30 each day and goes until about 2:30. Anyone in any part of the world, that is what is important, anyone in any part of the world can follow this inquiry live on their computer.
Right, and
by logging into ncmguyana.com. It is important to point out when we're on programs like this that the public needs to be involved. And as I said the last time I was on the program, people within the public can write to the Secretariat, to the Commission, at the Walter Rodney Secretariat at gmail.com. The public should also get involved on Facebook, because we keep posting the information coming out of the inquiry as it happens at Justice for Walter Rodney on Facebook, Justice for Walter Rodney on Facebook. Members of the public can also communicate with the Justice for Walter Rodney Committee, Justice for Walter Rodney at gmail.com. We're doing this because we want to keep people across the world informed about what is going on in the inquiry. And so we have been, the Justice for Walter Rodney Committee is carrying out this function of educating people, of keeping people informed, of giving them information as the process unfolds. Again, people with information, wherever they are, because so many Guyanese, so many people have moved out of the region, out of Guyana. If people have information on the events and on the period, they need to contact the Commission and bring that information forward. We may think that any information in our possession is not important. Well, we may have a newspaper article, for instance, that from that period, which we may think is insignificant, but we should send those to the Commission. We should make those public. We should publish them on the Facebook page of the Justice for Walter Rodney Committee, because what the Commission is doing is trying to piece together what happened in that period, and any piece of information that is available out there needs to be brought forward and brought into the process.
Right, and I know that people do have some of this information, because from time to time you see a post or an email coming into you saying, I was here, or I had this, I had knowledge of this and so on, so that it makes sense, as you're saying, that there is a Facebook page, Justice for Walter Rodney, but also that you can write directly to the Commission. Please let us have that email address again, Dr. Wazir Mohammed, for the Commission of Inquiry.
Walter Rodney Secretariat, one word, Walter Rodney Secretariat at gmail.com.
All right. And thank you, too, for the great work that you're doing in this regard, in keeping us informed and updated on what's happening, especially by email and on the Justice for Walter Rodney Facebook page. Brilliant work there, Dr. Wazir Mohammed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the work that you are doing and giving information to the public out there.
And thank you very much for joining us on the Africa Forum this morning. We'll keep glued to the Facebook page, but also keep in contact with you as the Commission of Inquiry continues.
Thank you.
All right. Of course, that was Dr. Wazir Mohammed, member of the Justice for Walter Rodney Committee and Associate Professor of Indiana University, and also, as you know, an associate.
Uniting the African family for development.
All right, you're inside of the Africa Forum. Going to go back to the phone lines now to speak with activist, scholar, renowned public speaker, professor, workshop leader, author, organizer, and visionary of exceptional influence. He has addressed audiences across the world, from North America to Britain to France, all of Europe, Africa, and of course will be coming into the Caribbean, to Jamaica, for our special Marcus Garvey, Mwalimu Marcus Messiah Garvey Day celebrations on August 17 this year. We're talking about our brother Oba T Shaka, and he joins me now on the phone lines live from San Francisco. Professor Oba T Shaka, thank you very much for joining us on the Africa Forum. Welcome to the space.
Thank you. It's a great honor to have a chance to talk about the Honorable Mwalimu Marcus Garvey.
All right, and we're so happy. I was saying to my colleagues that when I called you to tell you about this event and mentioned Molemu Marcus Mosiah Garvey, you said, "Well, he's my master." And I thought that
coming out of the San Francisco Civil Rights Movement, which I led between 1963 and 1965, an awakening occurred in the movement around black consciousness and black nationalism around 1963, and that coincided also with the publication of a book on Marcus Garvey called Black Moses by a white author named Cronin. It turns out not to have been a very good book, but for its time it was good because it informed us of the great organizing Garvey had done. So that awakening of black nationalism inside the civil rights movement coincided with a reawakening of our knowledge of Marcus Garvey. So Garvey had a real impact on the movement. Kwame Ture, then called Stokely Carmichael, was heavily influenced by that. Black Power was the Nation Islam had been.
Yes.
So Garvey was central.
And you mentioned the San Francisco Civil Rights Movement, of which you were the leader, one of the main leaders of the San Francisco Civil Rights Movement. Let us talk a little bit about that, how Marcus Garvey impacted that, as you alluded to just now. But the San Francisco Civil Rights Movement itself, what drove that? What led to that?
This is a little-known movement, and it is the most successful in the North. It would be really correct to describe the civil rights movement of the South and the North as a freedom movement, because the majority of people that took part in it, the grassroots, they had no concept of wanting civil rights, though certainly there's nothing wrong with that, your right to vote, your constitutional rights. But what they wanted was freedom. And so in San Francisco, unlike the South, the issue wasn't so much segregation or the denial of the right to vote. The issue was power, and blacks had been frozen out of the economy. After World War II, the jobs that blacks had working in factories that produced war materials, those jobs ended, and so blacks were fundamentally cut out of the economy. We couldn't work in banks or supermarkets or any of the businesses, and the only jobs we had was shining shoes, sweeping streets, working in the post office, as my father did, as a longshoreman on the waterfront. So essentially, it was an anti-apartheid campaign to focus against economic apartheid. And so it was the Mother movement that some of our shock troops came from UC Berkeley. They would go back and start the free speech movement at UC Berkeley. We gave birth to that movement. This is the key thing about both the Garvey movement and the Black Power and freedom movement of the 60s is it's the cutting-edge movement. For Garvey, Garvey's movement inspired African independence movements and the independence movements in the Caribbean. And in the case of the freedom movements of the 60s, it put in motion all other groups. And so we influenced white youth who began to take up our culture. The Garvey movement was very democratic. The black freedom movement was very democratic. Garvey would meet in huge conventions where the officers, including himself, were elected after great debate and argument. And at the local level, you had African men and women who shared office. I don't know if Garvey knew it, but at the local level, he would have a male president and a female president, male treasurer, a female treasurer. That's the Asante system of the Queen King Mother, where men and women share parallel responsibilities. So the San Francisco Civil Rights Movement was inspired by consensus-based democracy. And though I was chair of the Congress of Racial Equality, one of the dynamic civil rights groups, our decisions were made through consensus, and we never lost a battle. So the free speech movement came out of that. We're the forerunners of the Black Panther Party. Before there was a Black Panther Party, there was this San Francisco freedom movement. And between 64 and 65, we put 10,000 people in the streets for jobs. And then it was also the forerunner for black studies. Some of our students who had been arrested at one of the big demonstrations for jobs for the hotel and restaurant industry, the Sheraton Palace Hotel, while in jail, they conceived of the experimental college, and that became a funded arm at San Francisco State University, where I taught since 1972, that became the forerunner for black studies. So they brought out people like Amiri Baraka, Sonia Sanchez, and others who taught in black studies. And it was a forerunner of black consciousness. One of the key leaders of the black arts and cultural movement, a brother named Dingani, at that time, Joe Goncalves, who was chair of our education committee, he would go on to found the Journal of Black Poetry, which would be the cutting literary arm for the black consciousness, black arts movement, publishing Amiri Baraka and others. Garveyism would serve as the impetus for the black renaissance that occurred in the 20s in Harlem and across the United States. Mm-hmm. So in the midst of that, some of us underwent an awakening.
Yes.
And it was a transformation of consciousness. And it occurred in part, my awakening occurred because in the midst of taking on big corporations, I realized that I did not really understand the nature of the enemy we faced. And if I didn't understand the nature of the enemy I faced, I didn't understand myself. I didn't know myself as an African person. Mm-hmm. And a number of us underwent that awakening. Malcolm underwent his awakening in prison. And it caused us to begin to read and study deeply our history. And that's when we discovered Garvey in 1963. So that consciousness raising,
yes,
Garvey played a key part. One of the things that Garvey taught us was the value of institution building. We knew how to build marches, boycotts, demonstrations. We could form alliances with black churches, the black middle class, the black grassroots, and with Chinese Americans, Mexican Americans. We led a coalition of people of color. But we did not know how to build institutions, and we learned from Garvey the value of building institutions, educational institutions. The group I'm in now, Pan-African People's Organization, that group has operated an independent black school since 1972. Garvey inspired that. We learned the value of self-reliance because the civil rights movement was at the national level funded by labor groups, philanthropic organizations, various white organizations. At the local level, we were not funded. We were independent, and we were free of any control. But we were not good at business development. So from Garvey, some of us, including myself, learned the value of business development. In 1965, 1966, I organized 211 cooperative units in the Fillmore, cooperative housing, named the Marcus Garvey Martin Luther King Co-ops. But we learned the value of economic self-reliance. The group Pan-African People's Organization, we insisted that the group be self-reliant. When we were first formed, black businesses, civil rights groups, Marcus Bookstore, the oldest black bookstore in the United States, and others provided money to finance us. So we learned the value of economic self-reliance from Garvey. I'm a co-founder of the National Black United Front. G2 Weusi, who recently passed, was the architect that pulled this organization together. It's one of the most militant groups in the United States. And I insisted when we formed the National Black United Front that it be self-reliant. No white money, meaning no foundation money, no Democratic Party money, no corporate money could come into the organization. And that's kept the organization honest, and independent. So Garvey inspired that, along with Black Pride, which the pride came out of our discovery of our African past and our love of our people. But Garvey helped direct that because that was a central plank of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. So Garvey was fundamental. And then his African orientation in terms of hooking up with African people around the world and fighting for African independence.
Yes.
In the 70s, we had the African Liberation Support Committee. and in the Bay Area, our group Pan-African People's Organization headed that up. We have 25,000 people rallying each year to provide money and support for African liberation movements. This was occurring in the U.S., in the Caribbean, in Europe, and around the world, and of course in Africa. So Garvey was fundamental.
And as I listen to you, Professor Shaka, I'm getting goosebumps just listening to you talking about the extent to which Marcus Mosiah Garvey impacted your thinking as a young person and so many others around you, leading to the San Francisco Civil Rights Movement and the pillars on which the Civil Rights Movement stood, including institutional building, business development, economic self-reliance, and black pride. 100 years now. July 20 will be exactly 100 years since Marcus Garvey founded the UNIA. How important and how far have we come as a race, wherever we are, in understanding and in tapping into these principles of Marcus Garvey: institution building, business development, economic self-reliance, black pride? We're seeing a lot of that. But in terms of the economics and building institutions,
I think that we have a lot more work to do, and I think in countries in the Caribbean, such as Jamaica, in Africa, in the United States, the business entrepreneurial drive of the masses of our people need to be supported. I've noticed when I was in Jamaica how the markets and stuff that blacks have in Jamaica look very much like Africa. If you go into an African village,
yes,
it looks very much the same. African people have this drive for business, and what needs to happen is everyday poor black people need to have access to capital so that they can build those businesses. The IMF, the World Bank, they're not concerned about that. Our governments need to be concerned about that. Even Cuba, which is great island nation, Castro has done great work. Cuba could have done more to encourage the masses of Cubans to set up their own businesses. And I think in many cases, the Cuban leadership was afraid of capitalism. So, they were afraid that if that happened, capitalism would develop. But Africans come out of a communal tradition where the air, the land, the water is owned by no one, but we can share it. And Africans have this drive towards business. And so as a result, in traditional African societies, the king, the queen, the head of the nation had no say-so in the economy at the local level. And if in Jamaica, for example, the average African could be given resources, money, capital to set up businesses, you would find a tremendous economic takeoff. So, and in this country, the same thing. That the problem for blacks in this country is after the 60s, powerful forces hit the black community. Our leaders were attacked. I faced 3 assassination attempts.
Wow.
An attempt to deny me tenure at San Francisco State. I've never lost a battle I fight. But many of our leaders were killed. And then we had the breakup of black communities through redevelopment programs where the big business would come in and tear down black communities. And then we had, deindustrialization where jobs were taken out of the country, sent to China and plus like that, so that it undermined the economic base of the black family because many of those jobs black men could support their families with. Jamaica faced this through destabilization, IMF, World Bank, and the Caribbean did, and Africa did. I mean, much of the progress of Walimo Julius Nyerere, of Kwame Nkrumah, who said the books that inspired him most was Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. Nkrumah set up an educational system, a healthcare system. He built the Volta River Project that provided electrical power to Ghana. But with his overthrow, and then in the 80s, the imposition of structural adjustment in Africa where Western powers come in, and in exchange for aid, they require no free education, no free medical care. They drive the masses of people into poverty, and that's what Africa's facing now, along with too much corrupt leadership. So Garvey, on the one hand, Garvey wanted to put a limit on capitalism. He did not want the rich to get richer. And in his proposals for returning some blacks to Africa, he wanted to build cooperatives. He wanted to build up an economic base. His son has made similar proposals around this idea of African socialism, which is similar to what Nyerere called for in Tanzania. So there's a real need for economic development. And now in the United States, where now only about 37% of our families have a man and a woman in the family, a husband and wife. And the main reason is no finance, no romance. The jobs have been weakened. The jobs that are available for unskilled black men and unskilled black women, you can't support a family with it. At McDonald's, making $8 and $9 an hour. You can't possibly support a family on that.
Later on in the discussion, we want to, within that context, look at what the challenges now that we face as an African family at all different levels, and how we, Mwalimu Garvey can inform how we move ahead. But you mentioned earlier two things that I want to pick up on. One is the damage done to the Caribbean and also to Africa in terms of structural adjustments and so on through the IMF, the World Bank, and so on. We just saw in the last few days the head, the managing director of the World Bank, Christine Lagarde, come into Jamaica and in her own powerful way defined for us our own reality. And majority of Jamaica, a lot of Jamaica in terms of the power structure of Jamaica, governance and so on, buying into that, this reality that she's defined for us in terms of our borrowing from the IMF and the way we're locked into these institutions. But you have pointed to institutions like these, the IMF and so on, and to say that in terms of economic independence and economic self-reliance that Mwalimu Garvey spoke about, that these things are actually in opposition.
Yes, definitely.
How so?
The head of the IMF has tried to make it appear that the IMF has made mistakes in the past and they're going to correct these mistakes. These were not mistakes. When World War II ended, there was a series of agreements that came under what was called the Bretton Woods Agreements. And this called for the creation of the United Nations. This was the previous president of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt's idea, conceived when Winston Churchill was at the White House. Churchill didn't like the idea because he was a colonist. So was the United States. But the United States was going to supplant Britain. So at the end of World War II, they create the United Nations. But they make sure that the various nations of the world would not have the main power. It would be in the Security Council. And either the United States, Britain, China, any of the members of the Security Council could veto anything that came from the masses of nations in the world. They also created the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and then they created a global economic order that was pegged to the dollar and it was pegged to gold. The thing about the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank is these are institutions that are designed to freeze the world at the level they were at when they were created, meaning to keep the U.S. and then Western Europe on top and to keep the nations of color on the bottom. So if you look at any countries that have made progress, they have not followed the IMF or World Bank. China has not followed the IMF or World Bank, and China has taken 300 million people out of poverty. I understand now the IMF is looking at privatizing water in Jamaica, one of the last resources you have. Now, water under colonialism was free. now in South Africa and in other parts of the world, poor people have to pay for water because then they transfer the control of whatever you have, bauxite in Jamaica, whatever your resources are, to private owners. And these private owners are there to make a profit. So this order does not benefit the masses of the people. And I understand in Jamaica now, everyday Jamaicans don't even have access to the ocean because all that beachfront is owned by foreigners.
Yes, that is.
So this is a system of impoverishment because what they're using is private ownership. People, rich billionaires, who are coming in and gaining control of the resources of a country. Now, these Western countries are supposed to be democratic. Yet when it comes to the rule of the IMF and World Bank, there's no democracy. It's autocracy. And what's happened now in Europe with the collapse of the Western economy, now Westerners are facing this. Greece has been forced to sell off almost all of its assets, its national heritage sites. They've lost their pensions. They've been extremely weakened, and the Greek economy has been made worse by it. So it's an opportunity for the rich to get richer. It does not work for the benefit of African people or for now even Europeans or Asians. So Garvey's idea of economic independence and self-reliance and his idea that leadership should love their people so much that they use their leadership to uplift their people. And wherever you see people making progress in the world, there is some affection that the leaders have for their people. The Chinese have corruption in their system, but they have enough love for Chinese people that out of 1,300,000,000 people, 300 million in the last 35 years have been removed from poverty. 300. They have billionaires, they have corruption, but not to the point that they stole everything in sight and the masses of the Chinese people are all in poverty. Because if that happened, 1,300,000,000 Chinese would have overthrown that government. And Africa needs that kind of dedicated leadership that places the people first. But for that to happen, you have to love your people. And I think that Garveyism, the key plank of Garvey's principles was the love of African people and race consciousness, which is a principle of African-American culture in the United States. This idea that the race should come together and uplift the entire group of the race of African people. And Garvey had that commitment.
How important is, as Bobby E. Wright speaks to, and also Mwalimu Garvey, is the development of a black social theory in all of this? Bobby E. Wright, for example, says, without a black social theory, we will continue to stumble through history, and that such a theory would lead to a solution of our minds, our conscious minds. So for me, it seems to me as if we're also lacking that within our society. Love of people, love of race, and also what is missing is this ideology, is this black social theory that we've not managed within our society. Love of people, love of race, and also what is missing is this ideology, is this black social theory that we've not managed to develop.
Well, I think it's in development. Because what you have is African philosophy is at the foundation of African culture. And so in ancient Africa, African philosophy was centered around, it's part of your name, Ma'at, the notion of harmony, truth, justice, right order. This idea comes from a little-known people who are the origin of humanity, the Chwa, the Europeans incorrectly call pygmies. And the Chwa give birth to this notion of Ma'at. They called it Mazuri. One of the books I've written is called The Integration Trap, Generation Gap Caused by a Choice Between Two Cultures. And I look at how the world's first people, the Chwa, who came into being 144,000 years ago, gave birth to civilization. They gave birth to the idea of one God. And they saw God as spirit. They called God Ilani, or vital force, the energy that is in everything. So that the African has always seen God in every part of life. And that's what sustained us through enslavement, because we believed that the Spirit of God dwelled inside of us and all around us. And so it gave us a sense of power. That's part of our social theory. And if you look at African culture in the Caribbean, in South America, if you look at African culture in the United States, African culture that springs from Africa, spirit is the foundation of it. Garvey's slogan was one God, one aim, one destiny. And so the fact that spirit was very central, and the fact that his mother wanted to call him Moses, and his father wanted him named after himself, Marcus, and so they compromised Marcus Mosiah Garvey as a prophet, somebody who was going to come and lead us to freedom. And by the way, Garvey was prophetic. Yes. He was no God in the big G sense. He was a human being with strengths and weaknesses like all of us. But Garvey had this prophetic gift that not too many of us have. So the social theory of Ma'at was crucial in terms of African people in its foundation. Today, I think that what is very important is we need to appreciate the culture that Africans reconstructed out of enslavement in the Western Hemisphere, in the Caribbean, in South America, in the United States. We often, when we talk about the forerunners of Garveyism in the United States, we will refer to the free men of color. Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, who was a bishop in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, who called for the independence of Africa, the migration of Africans to Africa, or Edward Wilmot Blyden, who talked about the African personality, and who was the most insightful African coming from the West on Africa, because he went to Liberia and observed African traditional customs. He wrote a book called African Life and Customs. He's normally known for a book called Christianity, Islam, and the Negro. But his most important book is Africa, Life, and Customs, where he explains the origin of polygamy, where he explains the sharing that occurred through communalism, where he explains the societies, the secret societies, the Poro Society, that trained African men in manhood and trained them in warriorhood and trained them to build up their societies, and the African women's societies that did the same thing for women. So while Garvey drew from these traditions, Garvey more than anything drew from the Maroon tradition. His father was a descendant of the Maroons. And this tradition that in the United States we also have, not only Maroonage, where Africans would escape from the plantations, go into the mountains or into the swamps in Louisiana and form their own societies and fight to free their people. But what is often missed, when we talk about the impact of the forerunners on Garvey, is the field blacks. And what the field blacks constructed in terms of a new Africa, I call this culture, the Rasta culture in Jamaica, is New African. It's a part of Ethiopianism. And Garvey was very much inspired by Ethiopianism. This idea that there's a biblical passage that says, princes shall come out of Egypt, Ethiopia shall stretch forth its hand unto God soon. And the fact that Ethiopia had maintained its independence during the whole period of colonialism gave Africans in Africa, the United States, and around the world this belief that one day all of Africa would be free. Ethiopianism became the forerunner of Pan-Africanism. Garvey never used the word Pan-Africanist. Du Bois held a series of Pan-African congresses, and the first was held in London in 1900 by Sylvester Williams. But Garvey was the functional, practicing Pan-Africanist. In other words, he created a global organization that called for the liberation of Africa. So in building social theory, Pan-Africanism is crucial. The idea not only of one Africa, but of one African people. I remember reading years ago where a Jewish historian made this comment. He said that Garveyism, and particularly the Pan-Africanism that Garveyism drew from, was stronger than Zionism, or this idea that Jews must return to Israel, and in this case dispossess the native people to build their own nation. His point was that based on just the idea of one African people, an entire movement was pulled together. So our culture, this new African culture created in the Western Hemisphere, is a spirit-based culture.
Yeah.
It is a culture that believes in democracy, and it is a consensus-based democracy. In the United States, jazz, for example, is the high point of the musical culture of the blacks in the United States. It's a aristocracy of democracy. We have Dukes, Wellingtons, Count Basies, but at the same time, it's a democracy of improvisation. And improvisation is a key point of African and new African culture. In the U.S., hip-hop. In, Jamaica, dancehall. The culture of our people means that everyone needs to have a say-so, and a consensus needs to be hammered out based on that. So also our culture is humanistic. Garveyism was about freeing Africa, but Garvey also supported the freedom of the Irish. Garvey was a humanist because African-American culture, and when I say African-American, I mean the Africans in the Americas.
Yes.
Our culture, unlike most nationalisms, which can end up being racist, ours is humanistic. Black people care about all people. Sometimes we care more about other people than ourselves. That's where we need to get our act straight. But we are humanistic and kind people, basically. Even though the drugs that have impacted us, the gangsterism that has impacted us, has weakened this humanistic impulse. Mm-hmm. We are humane people.
And it does
show... these are all constructs for our culture.
Yes, and it does show in the extent to which we open our homes, in which we share our hearts, leading sometimes to enslavement. I'm going to ask you to hold the line for me, please, Professor Shaka. When I come back, we look at some of the challenges as we go forward. 100 years inside of the Africa Forum, Running African. On the phone lines, my very, very special guest, activist, scholar, renowned public speaker, professor, workshop leader, author, organizer, and visionary of exceptional influence, Dr. Oba T Shaka. He's going to be coming into Jamaica in August for our celebration of the life, the legacy of Mwalimu Marcus Mosiah Garvey, 100 years of Garveyism. Professor, as we go into the final 20 minutes or so of the discussion, and of course, we'll be talking to you many times before you come in for our celebrations in August. You talked about Mwalimu Garvey's philosophy of freeing Africa and his tapping into Pan-Africanism and so on. And then earlier on, you spoke also of his son, I think it's Dr. Julius Garvey, who is also carrying this message across the world. I want to look briefly at one of the challenges we face now in terms of land grab in Africa, the extent to which we see African lands, and not just on continental Africa, but the Caribbean, being sold off cheaply and sometimes even given away, the extent to which we are denied simple things like water, basic amenities, at the expense of food security for global conglomerates and countries and so on. Where does this fit into how we move forward as a people, in terms of how we move forward to free Africa, free ourselves, the liberation process? How are we as Africans to view this new development, fairly new development, in our conscious time?
I've written a book called Return to the African Mother Principle of Male and Female Equality. John Henry Clark and Dr. Asa Hilliard wrote introductions to this book, and this book was driven by my experience and the experience of our people historically around trying to create a just society. And so I was trying to discover what was the basis of the just societies of Africa. And what I discovered through vision, a spiritual awakening, but also through careful research, was that the traditional societies of Africa were societies where men had no more power than women, and women had no more power than men. And I called this not matriarchal, where women ruled, not patriarchal, where men ruled, not matrilineal, where the last name comes from the mother's family, or patrilineal, last name comes from the father's family. But I came up with a new term And Dr. Theophile Obenga said this should be in the dictionary. This is one of Sheikana Diop's best students. He lives in the Congo now.
Yes, yes.
And I call this social theory in terms of black family, not matrilineal or patrilineal, but twinlineal, which means that our
Could you say that? Sorry, Prof. Could you say that for us again?
Twinlineal. What it means is our lineage is not from our mother alone or our father alone. It is from our mothers and fathers.
Yes.
And it means our grandmothers and grandfathers. And if God is conceived in physical form, he and she, even though God is probably spirit and not sexual. So this idea, which comes from the Twa, it comes from the idea that men were hunters, women were gatherers. They would gather the wild foodstuff in the forest or the desert. And they played an equal role in the economy, and they played an equal role in decision-making. This is the secret of the power of African nations. And so the land, the air, and the water, since God was viewed as Ilani, or vital force, it was all sacred. And so the land, the air, and the water belonged to no individual. It was for everyone to use, and your responsibility was to pass it on in better condition than you received it. And so this also led to an environmentalism where nature was not raped. You did not have a hole in the ozone. You did not have global warming. You did not have a danger to the existence, the melting of the ice cap of the earth that exists now, that has occurred through greed. So what I'm suggesting is that Africans need a reconstruction of the idea of the nation and ultimately of the continent of Africa. And it has got to be a notion based on the empowerment of the people, where the people have the ultimate say-so in the use of their resources. And if Africans had the ultimate say-so on who uses the oil, who uses the uranium, the gold, the bauxite, whatever the resources we have, they would not be sold off to not the highest bidder, the lowest bidder, which is what the IMF and World Bank does. Or Japan comes in and buys up all these ocean rights, and so the fish are taken by big trawlers, and so now everyday Africans don't have the ability to fish, or their land is sold off, and in many parts of Africa that land is being left alone, and later they'll use it to produce food to feed their own people while Africans starve. So we need a social theory based on twinlinealism and based on democracy, where men and women have an equal say-so in running their society. Mm-hmm. And we are basically democratic instinctively as a people, but this will require a revisiting into the best of African traditions and African past. And it also means women have to be elevated, because as Malcolm said, you measure the level of a society by the level of its women. This is especially true for Africans. Europeans have been able to conquer the world and degrade their women. Africans go the way of their women. And if the women are low in terms of low education, low power, or low respect, the race is low. So women have to be elevated. And if we look at Africa, the food supply of Africa is provided mainly by women, because coming out of the hunter-gatherer societies, women are the chief agriculturalists, yet they have the least power, the least say-so. So we need to empower males and females, but especially just males and females. We need a different conception of government. It cannot be the Western conception where government is used to protect private property, which is the John Locke system in his 2 treaties of government. The American government is based on that. The one power that the Congress does not have is over capital. So they took the wealth out of the country. Now this country is being impoverished. People living on minimum wage, low wage, not just blacks, whites. Whites have lost 4 years, white males, of their life expectancy since the collapse of this economy in 2007, 2008. And if whites have lost 4 years, what do you think blacks have lost? So we need a new conception of how we run our societies. And at the base of it is how we run our families.
And that's
women have to be treated with respect.
And
you can't have abuse of women, the beating of women, the abuse of children. And that's the basis for constructing a just society.
And that takes me, Professor, to a point you made very, very early in this discussion on the black family. You talked about the extent to which there's a breakdown in the black family and some of the reasons for that. As my final question to you then, in terms of going forward, what are the challenges that we must face in terms of restoring the black family within the context, if you will, of Mwalimu Marcus Mosiah Garvey?
Yeah, family is really fundamental. And family today cannot be separated from economics. And I'm a scholar, but I'm into what walks and talks, what moves and grooves. And so if we're going to have functional families, then there's got to be an economic basis that supports it. So in this country, the fact that good-paying industrial jobs have left the country, this was a way for capitalism to make money because they used the cheap labor in Asia, in Mexico, and places like that to build their cars and to manufacture products, including clothes or whatever, and then sell them back, in the case of clothes, cheaply to their market. But they were cutting off their nose to spite their face, because if the masses of people do not have a sufficient income to support a family, they don't have a sufficient income to support the economy. The collapse of the global economy started in the United States with subprime lending, where many blacks, brown, and whites were given these terrible loans on their houses. And when they became due, they couldn't pay them. But the reason that they were using their houses as banking accounts was because they didn't make enough money on their jobs. So they were using the equity in their homes with poor financing coming from the bank so that they could rob them as much as possible so they could maintain a middle-class standard of living, because the job was not providing the income. So, and in the Caribbean, where, you had not only the IMF and World Bank, but, impoverishment. And so what ends up happening is that the average man doesn't have the capital to really provide well for his family, or woman, because women are really drivers in terms of the economic development. So there has to be a rebuilding of economies in order to strengthen the family. The family needs help in terms of economic development. And it's got to be an economic development that benefits the masses, because it's everyday people. In Jamaica, you have a saying that the culture comes from the dirt. The poorest people are the richest when it comes to the culture. And when you empower the poorest, then you are empowering the whole people, because they are culturally the richest. And when we base our economy on our culture, and it's got to be a culture which is Jamaican, African American, wherever, that is based on the people having the ultimate say-so. And while everyone won't make the right decision, when everyone has a say-so in it, in the end, the right decision is made. So family is really crucial to that. In the United States now, for the last couple of generations, it has become normal not to have a father in the house. And, they try to attribute this to the weaknesses of the black family caused by slavery. The black family maintained a two-parent household in the United States. 75% of our families from 1619 to 1968. Dr. Nathan Hare was the first to bring this out. From 1619 to 1968, 75% of our households had a husband and wife in it. It's only since 1968 that the black family has been weakened to the point that it's 37% of our households have a man and woman in it, and it is purely economic. Other factors play in, but it is largely economic. So if we're going to rebuild our societies, we have to give the people who make up the family unit the economic wherewithal to take care of that. In the United States, we have a skills mismatch because we were concentrated in the industrial sector of the economy. When those jobs left, we were left to fend for ourselves mainly in the service economy. And there's a high-tech service economy, computer-driven, and a low-tech, McDonald's, hamburger-driven. And as a result, we find ourselves in these low-paying jobs. And so what we have to do is retool. Garvey said the race that masters science and technology will rule the world. We shouldn't be interested in ruling the world, but we should use science and technology to empower our people all over the world and use the creative capacities of our people to build up economies of scale that will give our people support.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oba T Shaka. We're looking forward to having you in Jamaica in August for the celebrations, 100 years of Garveyism. Of course, you will be our main guest speaker, and thank you very much for agreeing to come in at very short notice also to celebrate with us here in the courtyard of IRI FM.
This is one of the greatest honors of my life to have an opportunity to address Jamaicans on one of the greatest leaders in the 20th century, Marcus Garvey, because Garvey organized the largest mass movement of any Africans in the world here in the Western Hemisphere, in the United States and in the Caribbean and around the world. And he faced the combined opposition of the Western world in doing that. But he had the love of his people that sustained that movement, as hard as it was to get our people together. And you know, I should point out that, you know, when we talk about Garvey, we often miss the people that helped develop him, his family, his father and his mother. His father was a great reader. He was a Mason, but he had his own library and had a great sense of race pride. His godfather, who he went to learn printing from, who was proud of, you know, his people, loved his people. But we also miss the fact that many of the institutions that Garvey built, other people influenced him. There was a man named Hubert Harrison, who was one of the most brilliant men or women in the United States at that time. He was the one that acquainted Garvey with race consciousness. Garvey was getting ready to leave the U.S. He had not figured out how to hook into the consciousness of blacks in the U.S. until he attended a Liberty League meeting after World War I held by Hubert Harrison. And he discovered that there was a new Negro, as he called it. Martin Luther King would refer to the blacks coming out of the Montgomery bus boycott as new Negroes. They were anti-war. They had fought in World War I, had come back and found bloody race riots occurring where whites were attacking and they were fighting back. And so Garvey piped into this race consciousness. He discovered race consciousness through Hubert Harrison. Hubert Harrison helped Garvey build Negro World, which was Garvey's propaganda arm, his newspaper. Garvey would have an article that would span 5 or 6 pages. Hubert Harrison reduced that. He came in and created a literary section. It was the first newspaper in the United States that had book reviews and stuff like that, poetry corners. And he introduced Garvey to the idea of having a flag. Garvey came up with the red, black, and green. But the idea of a flag came from Hubert Harrison. So Garvey in the beginning did listen and did learn from others, as Malcolm X did. Malcolm was heavily influenced by his parents, who had been members of the Garvey movement. Elijah Muhammad, the leader of the Nation of Islam, had been a corporal in the Garvey movement. And as I said before, Kwame Nkrumah said of all the books he read, Philosophy and Opinions inspired him most, and formed a Black Star Line in Ghana. So Garveyism, you know, when Garvey was forced out of the United States, he said, "You'll see me coming back in the thunder and lightning. I'll come back in the whirlwinds." And he did, in the form of the Mau Maus in Kenya, in the form of African independence movements. And when the 5th Pan-African Congress was organized in Manchester in 1945, one of Garvey's wives were there. Du Bois was the honorary chair. And Kwame Nkrumah, along with George Padmore, who was the principal organizer, his real name was Malcolm Nurse, they were piping into the spirit of Garvey because they were now plotting the freedom of Africa, which Garvey had called for in the very beginning of the organization of the UNIA. So Garvey's ghost was at the 5th Pan-African Congress, his spirit, because he had died 5 years earlier in Britain.
And as you point to those who were around him, we also remember the two Amys, the wives of Mwalimu Marcus.
Yeah, it seems like he liked Amy.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. T Shaka. We look forward to seeing you in Jamaica. We'll be talking to you many times before you come in, but really appreciate you taking the time out this morning to speak with us on the program. Thank you very much.
I really enjoy it, and I look forward to coming.
All right. All right, Dr. Oba T Shaka, activist, scholar, renowned public speaker, professor. You might know him or know of his name as Bill Bradley. This is the same Dr. Oba T Shaka who led the San Francisco civil rights movement against economic apartheid. He has written many books, including The Art of Leadership, Volume 1 and 2, Return to the African Mother, Principle of Male and Female Equality, Volume 1, The Integration Trap, The Generation Gap Caused by a Choice Between Two Cultures, and The Political Legacy of Malcolm X. He has written many more, actually. He is a warrior scholar, professor, and author. Warrior scholar. Dr. Oba T Shaka. He'll be with us in Jamaica, August 17, inshallah, for the celebrations of Mwalimu, the land grab situation in Africa with Dr. Oba T Shaka. Now, this is a very, very serious situation. And, of course, a few weeks ago, we spoke to the organizers of the first Africa Land Grab Conference that will take place in South Africa in October. We are bearing witness to a non-reversible corporatization of African land and agriculture on the continent of Africa. It's also happening here in the Caribbean and specifically here in Jamaica. What is happening is that large swathes of African farmland, Caribbean farmland, Jamaican farmland are being allocated to so-called investors, usually on long-term leases. And this is done at a rate not seen for decades. As you heard in our interview a few weeks ago, not for decades have we seen anything quite like this, not since the colonial period, to be frank. So these lands, we understand, and it's happening. The World Bank has been documenting this. Think tanks across the world have been documenting this and also participating at different levels. So these lands are being acquired to provide for the future food and fuel needs of foreign nations. Africa is a global center for land grabbing. We want to talk about that as we go through the morning, but also to say that this is not just on the continent of Africa. The race for food, fuel, and finance, the triple F, is driving land grabbing in Africa. And the broad agrarian structures are emerging, and you heard Professor Oba T Shaka talked about the gender structures in terms of women's role on the continent of Africa and provision of food. So that is also something that is being affected. So many persons are being driven off their land. So we're going to look at what are these land deals motivated by and the new forms of agrarian capitalism. Are we seeing a repeat of the past? These are questions we have to ask and answer. And by repeat of the past, we're talking about the scramble for Africa, the partitioning of Africa, and then to look at what's happening also.
It's Kanako, Brasilia. A look at the Africa teams at football's ultimate showpiece. I'm Roger Haspel. It's brought to you by Total Tools Rental and Repairs, now open in Kingston at 34 Slipe Road. Call us 908-0667. And Bounce Out Party and Furniture Store, Turtle River Plaza, Ocherias. Africa's interest at the Football World Cup ended last week as the two teams that made progress to the second round lost their games. Nigeria fought gallantly but eventually succumbed to a 2-0 defeat of France, with the goals coming late in the game. Following that contest, Steve Keshi, who became the first African coach to take an Africa team to the second round, announced he's stepping down as Nigeria's coach. Following the team's exit, Keshi had high praises for the team and believes they have set up a template for the future.
Do you think your team has proved at this tournament that they can compete with top nations?
Of course, you can always compete with any team. You know, it depends on the hard desire and all the stuff. It's good game, but it's just that the way we lost is not good.
African champions, and of course the first black coach to take an African side to the second round. Where do you think is the next step for these Super Eagles? How far do you think they can go from here?
Well, there can be a lot of improvement. The players are very young. It's a young group that, you know, there's a lot of room for improvement, and I think in the next 2 years, this group is going to be a wonderful team.
Outgoing Nigerian coach Stephen Keshi. The other African team, Algeria, they took Germany to extra time before going down 2-1. The talented Ivory Coast team were on the verge of qualification until they conceded a last-minute penalty. It must be noted that 2014 was the first time two African teams reached the last 16, but that achievement was overshadowed by rows over bonuses in fighting and allegations of match fixing. Of the 5 African countries competing in Brazil, only 2, Algeria and Ivory Coast, emerged unscathed with their reputations intact. Meanwhile, the presidents of Cameroon and Ghana have called for investigations after both countries were eliminated in the group stage and both teams finished at the bottom of their groups. In Cameroon, President Paul Biya was reported to have given his prime minister a month to submit a report on the Indomitable Land's Inglorious campaign. For Cameroon, the trouble began before the tournament when players refused to board the chartered plane to Brazil until a dispute over bonuses was resolved. The National Football Federation said it had to take out a private loan to meet players' demands, increasing the sum given to each squad member by $12,000. The total bonus was not disclosed. In 3 games, Cameroon conceded 9 goals and scored just 1 against Brazil after they had already been eliminated. The Cameroon Football Association is also investigating claims that several of their players were involved in match fixing. Meanwhile, Ghana's President John Mahama said an investigation was needed into why Ghana failed to advance to the knockout round for the first time in 3 World Cup appearances while the country's sports minister was sacked. Ghana's Black Stars also had disciplinary problems. 2 players were thrown out of the squad hours before their final match against Portugal. Suleiman Tari was suspended for allegedly attacking a team official, while Kevin Prince Boateng was suspended for alleged vulgar verbal insults targeted at coach Kwesi Appiah. The suspensions came just after Ghana resolved its own dispute over bonus payments when the government chartered a jet to fly $3 million in cash to the players in Brazil. Meanwhile, member of the FIFA Organizing Committee and South Africa's Football Association President Danny Jordan, while expressing disappointment that some of the African teams failed to get their house in order, he says the performance of the continent on a whole would be on par with Europe and ahead of Asia.
We had a meeting in Cairo with all of the qualified teams, and we asked them, please make sure that all the administrative issues and contracts and all those things are settled. So it came as a surprise, and it is very disappointing because it did distract from the teams, and particularly if some of the most senior teams in the Ghanaian team was told to leave the camp, and of course it will have an impact on the team's performance and the team as a whole. But notwithstanding that, I think we will have to make an argument that Africa's performance, although disappointing, is also not too far off the mark if you compare it with Europe. Europe, too, you'll have to describe that, too, as if you want to use the word disappointing, it equally applies to them. Remember, Spain came as the defending champions. They went out first round. Italy came as former champions out first round. England came, another country that's high up in the FIFA rank list. They out. So none of them performed in terms of their ranking on the FIFA list. And therefore, on the football field, of course, the number of shocks, not just for African countries and disappointment, but also for Europe, I think, and Asia as well. As I say, all 4 Asian countries went out in the first round, and that must also be disappointing.
That's Danny Jordan, member of the FIFA Organizing Committee and president of the South Africa Football Association. And finally, for African football to move forward, it must also find a way to forge an environment that looks after its players and has transparent and fair administration. Talented but troubled just does not cut it anymore. It's time for Africa to get its act together and start to fulfill its huge potential. That was Kenako Brasilia, a look at the Africa teams of football's ultimate showpiece. I'm Roger Hasswell. It was brought to you by Total Tools Rental and Repairs, now open in Kingston at 34 Slipe Road. Call 908-0667. And Bounce Out Party and Furniture Store, Turtle River Plaza, Ocherius.
Thank you very much, Roger Hass, for laying it in and lacing into the Africa teams. Time for Africa to get its act together, says Roger Hassfall. All right. Well, I know the frustration that many people felt that Africa did not go to the next round, but. Okay, so Nigeria and Algeria, first time African teams making it there, and we're not going to be too hard on them. I'm going to leave it to Roger to be hard on Africa. We're going to say next time we'll go further. The thing to do is to learn from our mistakes, and once again also to look at African football on the continent of Africa. The Africa Cup of Nations must inform the World Cup, and not only that, there has to be on the continent of Africa, I think, a more serious, I think North Africa is pretty serious about football, but generally across West Africa and other parts of Africa, we probably need to see governments and the state and agencies and so on more serious about how football is dealt with. So, yeah, Roger, I do agree. It's time for Africa to get their act together. Good morning to you, Mr. Halshin Burke. IRFM's local and international headlines coming up right after this.
Get it now! This is news from IRI FM, Jamaica's non-aligned news voice.
Good morning. I am Halshin Burke with the local and international headlines. The Director of Public Prosecution, DPP, has ruled that the matter resulting from a fatal shooting incident at the Jamaica Labour Party JLP meeting 3 years ago should go before the coroner's court. The coroner's inquest will determine if anyone is criminally liable. Reports that on December 4, 2011, a group of JLP supporters were gathering at a hotel in Hatfield in Manchester for a cocktail party hosted by then Central Manchester candidate Danville Walker. It's reported that an argument developed between two men over the speech given by party leader Andrew Holness at the meeting. One of two men reportedly drew a gun and shot the other. The identity of the dead man has not been revealed. A policeman accused of soliciting money from a motorist was granted bail when he appeared in the Spanish Town RM court. 36-year-old Corporal Howard Edwards of Eltham Acres in St. Catherine is charged with breaching the Corruption Prevention Act. Allegations are that sometime last month, Corporal Edwards stopped a motorist in St. Catherine for committing a traffic offence. The policeman reportedly requested $5,000 in exchange for dropping the traffic offence. The motorist reportedly said he only had $3,000. It's alleged that the cop took the $3,000 and told the motorist that the balance should be handed over at a later date. The motorist made a report to the police and a sting operation was set up during which the accused lawman was arrested. A Jamaican man was convicted last week by a South Florida jury of numerous charges related to an international sex trafficking case that involved women from the United States, Middle East and Australia. 37-year-old Damon St. Patrick Baston faces between 15 years and life in prison after his conviction on 21 criminal counts. Reports in the Associated Press say Baston is to be sentenced on Friday, September 5. In news overseas, at least 29 people have been killed in two deadly shooting attacks in Kenya's coastal districts. Witnesses said heavily armed men raided a trading center in the village of Hindi and a police station in Gamba, Tana River County overnight. The Somali militant Islamist group Al-Shabaab said it was behind the killings. Finally, pro-Russian separatists in Ukraine are reported to be regrouping in Donetsk after government forces retook some of their main strongholds. President Petro Poroshenko said the recapture of the rebel stronghold of Slavyansk on Saturday was a huge symbolic importance. But he warned that it was too early for celebrations. And those are the local and international headlines. News next at 11:45. From the IRFM newsroom, I'm Halshin Burke.
That was news from IRI FM, Jamaica's non-aligned news voice.
Thank you very much, Hal Shane-Burke, with the local and international headlines. IRI FM Sunday Sports Diary is up right after this.
Ready! Let's go! If you want that flavor feeling, the strings for you, it's so appealing. Tropical rhythms, it's the real deal. With vitamin C and it's Jamaican. Great tropical rhythms for the fun of life.
The time is...
Now 8:49, and Wade Brown is standing by with IRI FM's Sunday Sports Diary.
Good morning, I'm Wade Brown with IRI FM's Sunday Diary, where we take a look at the sporting events happening locally. Semi-final 1 in the St. Anne Cricket Association A-League will be played today at the Port Road Sports Club in Discover Bay. Dumbarton take on Chalky Hill in that game, which gets underway at 10 o'clock. Port Antonio PYC and Skibo will square off in the opening game of a doubleheader at the Skibo Oval today in the Westport Sports Club Portsland T20. The game, which gets underway at 10:30, will be followed by the 2 o'clock encounter between Swift River and Sunshine. In another game at the Chester Sports Ground starting at 2 o'clock, Chester oppose Bourbon. Norwood and Melbourne are down to meet in one of 3 games on today in the Western Sports St. James Baby Cricket League. That game bowls off at 10 o'clock and is followed by the match between defending champions Lynx and El Dorado at 11:30. Today's activities comes to an end with Belmont meeting Roadstar at 12:30. All 3 games will be at the St. Cleover's Car Park in Montego Bay. The Buckfield Community Football League gets underway this afternoon, starting with a dress parade at 2:30 at the Buckfield Community Center. The first match at 5 o'clock sees Police United facing Ocherous High, while Falkland take on Striker Academy in the featured match at 7. The opening game of the day is at 3:30, with Hill Stars opposing Great Pond in under-17 action. Quarterfinal action in the Uprising Knockout Football Competition in St. Elizabeth is on today at the Uprising Oval in Bull Savannah. The first match at 2:30 will see Trial taking on Fairfield, while Prospect meet Junction United at 4:30. The Lacovia CDC Night Football Competition continues tonight with a triple header at the Lacovia Community Center. Holland Village are down to meet Housing in the first match at 7, after which leaders Houghton take on Dry Harbour at 8 and Reading oppose Cornwall at 9. Another 2 games are on today in the Limehall Community Football League. Newground Strikers are down to meet Toronto FC in the day's first match at 2 o'clock, after which Tivoli Strikers take on defending champion Strikers at 4. Both games will be played at the Limehall Oval. York Castle and Middle East are down to meet in the lone game today in the Claremont Community Football League. Game time 4 o'clock at the Prosper Hall Oval. Addison Park and the Naranda Sports Club will host today's matches in the St. Anne Netball Association Naranda Sports Club Netball League. At Addison Park, in the opening game at 3 o'clock, Rosetta play Bamboo. At 4, St. Dacre face Glasgow, and at 5, it will be Higginland against Bethel Town. At the Naranda Sports Club, Eltham and Foundation Divas face off at 3, following which Ocherous B go up against Limeshee Gardens at 4, and at 5, Ocherous Strikers Seniors tackle Brownstown Masters. And finally, 5 matches are down to be contested today in the Division 2 of the Ray and Nephew Overproof White Rum sponsored Western Domino League. The action starts at 1 o'clock with Rainbow facing Small Axe, Peace and Love going up against Thatch, and Dallas meeting Wakefield. In other games, Glendevon CDC take on Broadway and Paris Strikers tackle Venus. From the IRI FM Sports Desk, I'm Wade Brown.
How are you doing, Mr. Wade Brown?
I am fine.
Good morning to you, yes.
Morning to you as well.
I see you're doing very well at World Cup.
We are. Argentina.
Wow, I've never seen you so animated in a long time.
It feels good.
It feels good?
Yes, for more reasons than one, trust me.
Yes. And what are the reasons?
For one, you had a lot of bandwagon supporters for Spain coming on in the last World Cup, and they have to be quiet right about now.
Right. But what about the real supporters of Spain? Still quiet right about now?
The thing is, honest, look, with me, I like 3 teams in world football coming from the 90s. Mm-hmm. Argentina, the Super Eagles from 94, Spain from 97. Okay. And I was forced to just leave Spain alone because it's like so much people saying Spain, and I'm like, where were you guys before 2008?
No, but then that's why you give up a team. But you can't give up a team because you're wagonist.
No, because the thing is, if people hear me say I like Spain, they're going to say, boy, it's because they start winning now. But the truth is, it's from 1997, so I just leave them alone.
No, but we know you're Argentina fan. I didn't even know you. I mean, don't give up a team just because. I mean, look how long I'm with Tottenham Hotspurs.
Mm-hmm.
You think I'm going to give them up just because they're not winning?
But too much people jump on the bandwagon right now, and I mean, they have to be quiet right now, so it was quite nice to see that happening. And of course, Argentina is winning and Messi is performing, so the critics have to be silent right now.
That's true. I agree with that. Yes. What about Brazil?
Brazil, wow. They're winning, but they haven't impressed me as yet. Honestly, they haven't impressed me because the front three is a disgrace. And
are they playing any worse than Argentina?
In my mind, in some ways, yes, because at least Argentina has an offense. Brazil, they have committed the most fouls at the World Cup so far. The last 2 games they played against Chile and Colombia, they kicked them out of the park.
Well, they're playing at home. But it's because they're playing at home.
Brazil is supposed to be playing the beautiful football or something.
No, they're not playing beautiful football. They're playing at home. They're playing at home. They're playing to win.
They're playing rough house tactics, and the Brazilian supporters are going to be upset. But it's true that they're playing nasty football, and you need to put the ball in the park and play football, man.
Well, I think considering so many things around the football in terms of the social issues, the demonstrations outside and so on, that Brazil has to play by any means necessary. You know, what about Neymar though? I mean, that was a vicious.
I think that guy should have been banned or something. Kishima is upset at me right now. Hi, Kishima. Me and Robert were talking about this last night, and I'm saying the guy, what's his name, Zuniga?
Whatever his name is, he should be fired, banned, imprisoned, tried, and charged.
It's deliberate because people are going to say he was looking at the ball. But look, in football, he saw Neymar in front of him.
Yes.
He ran towards Neymar.
Yes.
Neymar was near the Brazilian.
He held him onto his shoulder, haul him back and knee him in his back.
It was deliberate because he knew that he wouldn't get the ball. So jump, put your knee forward, look at the ball, the referee going to say, boy, look at the ball. But no, it was deliberate.
It was deliberate. Yeah, it was deliberate. And the moment it happened, I said that to my husband.
There was no foul. There was no foul.
I know.
Because
that referee must be banned forever.
It's a loophole because players know that, boy, if you look at the ball and continue, the referee will be saying that at least you're not looking.
Yeah, well, at least blow your whistle. Blow the whistle. The referee is supposed to be feeling bad. Because considering what came out of this, that a man landed in hospital with a broken vertebrae or whatever that was broken.
And they're saying that if it was maybe like an inch up, he'd have been paralyzed or something.
What a wicked act. I'm so upset about it.
Yes.
If it was my brother, I see something. But anyway.
It's not my team and I feel upset because it's deliberate.
It's not my team and I'm upset. You know? All right, so the African teams are out. Roger Haspel says that Africa must get its act together.
They're upsetting because, as you know, Nigeria is my favorite side, and almost every World Cup will come to a fight.
Roger Haspel says that Africa must get its act together.
They're upsetting because, as you know, Nigeria is my favorite side, and almost every World Cup will come to a fight over money. I can't forget 1990, they made me cry.
Yeah.
Lost to Denmark 4-1. And it's like, I can't understand, the Ghana team or whatever. You're going to get the money after the World Cup. 8 million guaranteed because they reach the World Cup. You're going to get it after the World Cup, you know. So what, you're going to come and fight about it before you leave on Cameroon? You can't spend the money in Brazil in a month. You just wait until the month is over and you get your money.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, something. But I heard that this is not unique to continental Africa, that African diaspora footballers are like that too when it comes to money. That even the reggae boys have pulled one such
trick before.
Yes. I'm just saying. So I heard, and I know I'm not wrong. All right. So Africa is out, but I still think that, you know, those two last games, Algeria and Nigeria, I think they played well.
Yes, especially Algeria. They really surprised me. They really put Germany to the wire.
Yeah. So what's going to happen now? How do you see this thing playing out?
You mean the World Cup? Argentina will win.
All right, and? But tell me how it's going to happen, because you have a theory of who's going to be knocked out when.
We're going to beat Holland. I don't think it's going to go to penalties.
Who are we?
Argentina, we're going to beat Holland on Wednesday.
Yes.
And then you have Brazil playing Germany. Germany is the best all-around team right now left in the tournament. And they just know how to navigate the tournament. And Brazil is at home. They're going to kick the Germans off the park. And
And the finalists will be...
You know, this could go to penalties. I don't even know what to say because...
You're not making a call on that?
It's hard to call on.
Okay, so you don't know. You know Argentina will be in the final, but you don't know who else.
Definitely.
All right, that will be Argentina and the Netherlands.
No, in semi-finals. We're beating the Dutch on Wednesday.
Oh, okay. All right.
They have no chance. They play the finalists today.
I'm not arguing with that. All right, but we still says the Holland will be in the final.
You feel that way?
But what you telling me? No feel away that job.
No, I know this one. I know this.
Oh, you know this.
I got this locked.
Okay.
Yeah, you know.
All right, and they're at Silverstone today. It's the Silverstunners.
And there was a crash with Raikkonen and Massa. They had to stop the race. And the last time I checked, after 24 laps, Hamilton was second behind Rosberg. So he's doing something good because I think he started at 6th.
Yes, he started at 6. He made a mistake yesterday.
Yes.
And he came out and said it was his mistake. A lot of people were up in arms and all these conspiracy theories were flying left, right, and center. But he came out and said, whoa, it's my mistake there. So that's when I relaxed myself. Because I was going to blaze Twitter too like everybody else.
And the thing is, I think he's a better, I don't want to say natural, but for some reason I think he's better than Rosberg.
Of course he
gets more out of the car, so
he is much better than Rosberg. I mean, Rosberg,
he'll make it up.
He'll make it up, and hopefully, and he needs to win this one for two reasons. One, he need to,
defend home turf.
He needs to defend home turf, but he also need to lessen that gap between
I think it's
Rosberg and himself.
Yes, definitely. So he needs to start winning. I think he have 11 races after this as well, so he needs to.
Right, so you're going to go to one of them, Texas, probably?
Oh, I would love to.
Yeah.
I would really love to.
Well, go ahead. Let us go cover it.
I wonder if my editor is listening because he's in charge of assignments.
Okay, Mr. Robert Williams, we're saying now, sir, live on the air, that we'd want to go and cover the F1 in Texas. I'll go with him.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. It's cool in our way.
Yes,
it's all good now. Yeah, we've done it the best way we possibly can. Thanks, walk good.
Yeah, thanks.
Jerky. Please tell that sports journalist Brazil are not kicking no one out of the park. Needs glasses. It's the other way around. Did you get that, Wade? And at Troubles 19, thank you very much. He says, listening to at Kambuma at Keru, up you mighty people, open your eyes. Black people, stop being fooled by illusions. Akila Montado at Akila Montado on Twitter says, I visited Amy Jakes Garvey's grave earlier this week. It's in St. Andrew Parish Church's cemetery. And wow, she's tweeted a photograph. Wow, thank you very much. Thank you very much for doing that. We appreciate that, Akila. Thank you very much. All right, and so many persons on Twitter. Thank you for posting your comments. Thank you very much for making it IRI FM. We're going to be going to the Netherlands shortly to speak with Aldith Hunker. And on Facebook, thank you very much also. Michelle at Mishanan39Z. Locked to the knowledge box. You say thank you very much, Michelle, on Twitter. Destiny72 on Twitter. DJ Gargamel on Twitter. Thank you very much for your posts and for your comments. And just for retweeting, for those persons who are retweeting, thank you very much. We have an entire army retweeting every morning on Twitter, every Sunday morning. We appreciate that. And Archangel on Facebook, I see you saying the landers, not the people. Okay, all right. Let me, if I could get to... You know, Facebook really takes such a long time to load sometimes, especially when you're trying to get it on your phone. All right, so you say... all right, Combo, when I tuned on this morning and found a space, I thought the germs had made a move. All right, yes, my brother. Okay, all right. Thank you, Archangel. I'm telling you, you got your finger on the pulse of things. You never know. And you say, supposedly a group of evildoers, killers, very well equipped, very well backed financially. Their target, Israel. That's a phony one, of course. All right, so we've been watching a few things, and did you know that the Africa Union, you know, this is interesting. Not much press on this one. We haven't heard it much in the news. But the AU Summit, they have taken a backward step, a decision, which is a backward step, I think. The decision by the Assembly of the Africa Union to grant sitting African leaders immunity from prosecution for genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. This is a backward step in the fight against impunity and a betrayal of victims of serious violations of human rights, and we agree with Amnesty International on that. You know, an official communique released by the Africa Union said that African heads of state and government meeting of the AU summit in Equatorial Guinea on the 26th and the 27th of June had voted to adopt an amendment granting incumbent government leaders and other senior officials immunity from prosecution in the African Court of Justice and Human Rights. You know, as upset as we're going to get about this, because we should be upset about it, we must remember that the International Court of Justice, it seems as if the United States has been granted immunity from the International Courts of Justice, and two wrongs don't make a right. But certainly what the African Union has done in this case in terms of giving themselves immunity from the International Court and the African Court, it to me is a slap in the face to every single African, wherever we are, that we have so much corruption among African leaders and even African diasporan leaders, that for them to come up with something like this is ridiculous. It's laughable, but not quite, because it is now in place. And that is why we have to watch a Caribbean Court of Justice too, because you soon find that Caribbean leaders grant themselves immunity from the Caribbean Court of Justice. And don't tell me that I do not understand it. Just like I hear some people saying that I do not understand economics, so I must not talk about economics. You know, we don't have to go, show our certificates and talk about what we've studied and so on, but please stop it. The thing is that you do not know anything about me, so don't say I do not know anything. So we've got a social theory, and anything that goes against that, and we have to make that known. So we still say that the managing director of the IMF, who was here last week, trying to define our reality to us, and for us to be accepting that definition as if it was a creation of our own, is ridiculous. And we still say the IMF is not the answer to our economic woes. In fact, the IMF will only make it worse. What's happening with South Africa and Kenya? We understand that South Africa and Kenya are in a visa battle. Kenyans have to get visa to go to South Africa, and that was happening for a very long time. Now, Kenya is doing the very same thing. If South Africans want to go to Kenya, they now have to get a visa, and the process to apply for that visa is as long and tedious as it. We've been looking at Noam Chomsky's America's Real Foreign Policy, published on July 1, and which he's talking about the hunches of a national security state, that they weren't exactly happy with Snowden's NSA revelations. We have been looking at that and want to talk about that later on inside. But Mugabe is addressing the land situation in Zimbabwe. Once again, he's saying to those who do not belong to give up the land. The land in South Africa still remains in the hands of whites. In Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe is trying to change that dynamic. He's been vilified for it, but it's the right thing that he's doing. Okay, we're going to go to a quick... Now, 12 minutes after 9 o'clock, we want to go up to the mountains of Croydon in St. James to talk about the Emancipation Day celebrations. While we're waiting on that, though, let me just tell you that the Nigerian girls who were taken, kidnapped, are still not returned, still not found, and we understand that some 600 more have been kidnapped. We don't know how true the numbers are, and that happened a week and a half ago or so. What happened to the Bring Back Our Girls campaign? Joining us on the phone lines, Adrian Baily, who is up there in the mountains of St. James, actually in Katadupa in the Croydon Mountains. Adrian, good morning.
Hey, Andrew, how are you doing?
I am doing very well, and you?
Very well, man. Nice morning this morning.
All right, and especially, are you up in the mountains?
I'm in the mountains.
All right, brilliant. Talk to us a little bit about Croydon in the mountains within the context of Sam Sharp. When we went in search of Sam Sharp recently, well, a few years ago, we were talking about this a lot, and we were there a lot. But I'm sure that there are many, many Jamaicans who are listening this morning, and non-Jamaicans on the internet, who do not know this connection. Talk to us about what the connection is.
Well, among the many discrepancies in history around Sam Sharp, around the Emancipation War, there's always been an association between Croydon Estate, where one school believes it was the birthplace of Sharp. Croydon Estate was redeveloped as a working farm and a forestry reserve starting in 1980 under the ownership of Dalkeith Hanna, a Jamaican quantity surveyor. The farm produced a product of excellence that beckoned the judges of the Denby Farm Show to encourage us to enter the All Island Champion Farm competition. That eventually ended up with us winning and winning twice more. Because then that you decided to show a tour of a working farm because of the proximity to Montego Bay.
And when we talk about a working farm, though, we talk about Croydon and the heritage tour that's happening there. This is not just any working farm. This is really one of the most beautiful places in Jamaica, if not in the Caribbean, if not in the world, right?
I agree on our account.
It is. It is really, really, really beautiful. All right, so...
But
go ahead.
To the heritage now,
yes.
2 years ago, a decision was made, particularly in light of Jamaica 50, to focus on the heritage and to find a way to spur discussion and reconnection with our history.
Yes.
Among the youth, particularly, to provide open space, a pleasing environment, a learning environment for Jamaican youth to reconnect with their heroes, and by extension, try and reconfigure some of the parts of our culture that we should be leaving behind us and parts that we need to adapt.
Yes.
So we have tried to do a celebration every year since then. March 23rd, which is Labor Day and the Day of Sharpers Hung, Emancipation Day, Heroes Day, and December 27th, when the fire from Kensington began the Emancipation War. This year, we are having, in association with the Cutter Cycling Club, an endurance ride of 150 miles.
All right, and then before you go into that, let me just say that when you say this year, now for August 1, Emancipation Day, the activities will be happening there at Croydon in the mountains, but you're starting from in the valley, which is in Kingston.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Talk to us about that.
Yes. Cutter's Cycling Club has been trying to put together an event with us over the last 2 years on one of these anniversary days. This year, unfortunately, they had a member who was diagnosed with cancer. So the Freedom Ride on August 1st is really to raise funds for her.
Yes.
And certainly fits in with the mode of the day that we're trying to benefit the attendees.
All right. And so you say it's called the Freedom Ride. And it's a freedom ride that is starting motorcycle or bicycle?
Bicycle starting at 5 o'clock.
Yes.
From Holy Trinity Cathedral.
Right. And what's the route?
Out of Kingston or Mount Rasa, down the coast, through Mobay, up Long Hill, through Anchovy, through Cambridge, and then to Catalupa. The finish line is at Catalupa.
That is a long ride. That is a long ride, yes.
Well, among the cycling community, which I'm not a part of, admittedly,
yes.
They have these Nickville rides, they have the Round the Island rides, but this one, after a ride to Montego Bay,
yes,
the Nickville riders usually have a fair, non-hilly stretch to the grill. But in this case, the hardest part of the ride starts in Montego Bay.
Of course, you're going up Anchovy and so on.
Yeah, Long Hill is.
Yes.
The Long Hill time is a constant uphill of about 2.7 miles.
Oh goodness!
Ridiculous.
Wow. And who are these cyclists?
Well, Deacon Chris Gooden, who is a regular visitor to Croydon and part of the family.
Yes.
These guys cut a cycling club, an amateur sports club, and they ride every morning, every weekend.
Okay, so they're fit. They're fit. They're fit.
They're fit, man. But even among the fit and even among the guys I've spoken to, you know, that long stretch from Montego Bay to Catadupa is a challenge.
It's a challenge. All right, and then they're not allowed to. They're not allowed to take no flatbed. Come up there, right?
no, only shockwave.
You're not easy, you know. All right. So we love the sound of it though, from Kingston, you know, all the way through to Catadupa to Croydon in the mountains. Wow. And this is for charity. This is for charity.
This is for charity. And of course, they are estimated to get up there about 4 o'clock.
Yes.
So in the morning, afternoon, waiting on them, there are a number of activities that were planned for the families, for the friends, for the visitors who come on that day.
All right. Tell us about some of those activities that will be ongoing in the morning at Croydon in the mountains before the riders get there. And here we're talking now about an Emancipation Day celebration up there at Croydon in the mountains.
Yeah. I must be honest with you, we wanted Ari FM up there that day.
Yes.
As you know.
Yes.
So we have had to shift our program a little bit, but one of the main focuses of the day, you know, there are a lot of celebrations around in the day, a lot of parties, lot of consumption, but a part of the Croydon family now is a group called Bold Inc. They're a leadership development group. We are going to be providing leadership sessions for youth up there, whoever comes with their family.
Yes.
Now, bear in mind that the riders are going to have family and friends, and they're going to be, of course, visitors from all of us who come up. So we have a team up there, Deacon Baldwin Powell, Dr. Luke Longworth, who will be doing free sessions under a system called John Maxwell Co., which they are representatives of in Jamaica. So, I mean, the real legacy of Sharp that we should be chasing after is the elements of his leadership.
Of course.
And we're trying to make the day a meaningful day. We've done so since 2012. We want to keep this momentum going with various activities that focus on culture change, focus on role modeling the heroes in a new, fresh way, trying to reconnect people with our value system. And
so that our listeners know also too, you know, that even while you're doing the serious aspect of it, that there is a heritage tour site there. I mean, it's a heritage tour, a proper tour that is out of this world, that people should really go and see. I think it's a brilliant job that you're doing.
Tour experiences up there, a plantation tour which explains, you know, the fruit, the forestry, the flora. There's a heritage tour experience which was established 2 years ago and is a work in progress that chronicles Jamaican culture changes over the last 400 years, but kind of dissect them through the elements of Sharp's leadership and show illustrations of extracts from the report from Parliament on the inquiry into the Emancipation War, some of which, you know, counter or vary from the history we've read in our history books. And so the Heritage Tour is certainly, you know, intending to be a catalyst for ventilating the truth, bringing, you know, sources, reports, evidence, data, academia, together to refine the history for our people.
It's brilliant. How can people get information, go and view Croydon? If there's a website that they could look at, I know probably on the day on Emancipation Day itself, this is where families can go, and maybe families, you know, parents are listening now, students are listening, and want to be a part of that on Emancipation Day. How can they get information on this?
As this is a situation in change, the website is probably not the best place right now. Our Croydon office, the telephone number is 979-8250, and they'll have the information.
979-8250. 50, yes.
Yes. And the Qatar Cycling Club has a website. We're putting up a website for the Freedom Ride.
Yes.
So any of those sources from this week on, you'll be able to get information on ours.
Right. And we'll be talking to you many more times before the event, but just so that people know, this is this sensitization of this first interview in terms of what is happening on Emancipation Day in St. James, way up in the hills, Croydon in the mountains, most beautiful place, and also that there is a freedom ride that's happening from Kingston all the way to Croydon, Catadupa on August 1. They're kicking off at 5 a.m. in Kingston and then hoping to get there sometime in the mid-afternoon, 3 o'clock or thereabouts.
4 to be safe for most of them. Yes.
The more we 3 man and can ride them feet at 3 o'clock. All right, Adrian, thank you very much. Is there a charge for persons on the day?
$3,000, lunch included, juices included, beverage on sale.
Right, and is a tour a part of that?
Absolutely, and each of the tour experiences, 2 of them.
All right, okay, brilliant. All right, so we'll keep in touch with you on this. Thank you very much, Adrian Baily. All right. Okay, Adrian Baily there. Croydon in the mountains, one of the most beautiful places in Jamaica.
Settable Plus gets rid of all severe pain and fever, so you can get back to the happier you. The time by Settable Plus is...
Now, 25 minutes after 9 o'clock, we want to go now to Curacao, where Professor Vereen Shepard is standing by. A Dutch court ruled Thursday that Black Pete, Zwarte Piet, is a negative stereotype of black people and said the city of Amsterdam should rethink its yearly tradition that welcomes him into its harbor. In December, the popular character descends on the city to hand out candy to children and assist Santa Claus with his duties, but the judge ruled that his looks and behavior can be hurtful to the country's black community. Professor Vereen Shepard has been one of the leading voices highlighting the racism inherent in the Black Pete character. And so she is in Curacao, interestingly, a former Dutch, country, colonized by the Dutch. Let's say that, colonized by the Dutch. And she's joining us on the phone lines to respond to this, and then in a little while we'll be going live to the Netherlands, to Holland itself, Dutch territory, where Aldith Hunker, journalist, is standing by to help us to understand a little bit more about this and also the response of the citizens there. Aldith Hunker is the CEO of Hunk Art for Global Freestyle Multimedia Journalism. She also moderates, does media coaching, and to this note on Facebook, he says 5 things they don't tell you about economics by Han Jun Chang. He says 95% of economics is common sense. You don't need a degree to understand it. 2, economics is not a science. Now they're calling it a social science, actually, which makes it not a science. Economics is not a science, despite what the experts want you to believe. There is more than one way of doing economics, and especially when it comes to macroeconomics. This is where things get very, 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 very tricky. And I notice that a lot of the commentary here in Jamaica on what the IMF is doing or not doing, coming from people who are macroeconomists, economists. And this is really, for us, it's troublesome. I think we need to look at and find the many, many different views, including the Pan-African view and the Marcus Garvey view on economics. We go live now to Curacao, where Professor Vereen Shepard is standing by. Good morning, Professor Shepard.
Hi, good morning. Good morning. Good morning to all your listeners.
We can find you wherever you are. Isn't that interesting?
Yes, that's what I have noticed.
All right, so you were just in the Netherlands, though.
Mm-hmm, yes.
All right. Well, Vereen, I wanted you to respond a little to the court ruling in the Netherlands, Black Pete as a negative stereotype. But before you respond, we have been saying that you have been one of the most vocal persons talking about the stereotypical and the racism and so on inherent in the Black Pete character. And you've come under some serious fire for this also by people in the Netherlands. So your own, so give us a background to this before and then respond to the court ruling.
Okay. Well, as some of you know, some of your listeners know, and I know you know, I'm a member of the United Nations Working Group of Experts on People of African Descent. And that working group was established in 2002 in the wake of the Durban Anti-Racism Conference. So one of our tasks is to study the situation of people of African descent all over the world, to investigate, well, maybe not investigate in the way the International Human Rights Commission would do, but to really make recommendations, especially when we get complaints about discrimination. We look into it and we make recommendations to the Human Rights Council. So for some years now, we have been getting complaints from NGOs, civil society groups, individuals in the Netherlands about the way in which this Black Pete figure, which some people refer to as the sidekick of Santa Claus in the Netherlands, stereotype Black people and make Black people who have to watch this festival on TV in the streets of Amsterdam and all over the Netherlands uncomfortable. And so the working group issued what we call an allegation letter to the government of the Netherlands, setting out the complaint that we receive from people and giving our own views about it. The government wrote back. These letters went public in the media all over the world, but of course in the Netherlands.
Yes.
And there was a huge backlash last year, October, just a month before, perhaps just under a month before the festival begins, because each year it begins on November 17 with the arrival of Santa Claus and Black Pete from Spain, southern Spain, into the cities of the Netherlands. And it's celebrated throughout the kingdom. As you know, the Netherlands has incorporated St. Eustatius, Saba, Bonaire into the Netherlands, leaving Curacao, St. Martin, and Aruba as countries, but within the kingdom. And so this is a widespread festival, and as more and more Black people live in the Netherlands, they become more and more uncomfortable with this. So this is the context within which this court ruling has been handed down, because of the big discussion last year, heightened by the UN intervention.
Yes.
21 people sued the city of Amsterdam. The mayor, really, the mayor of Amsterdam, Abraham van der Laan, because he's the one who gives permission for this festival to start in the Netherlands.
What does this court ruling mean then? Does it mean that this character is no longer allowed legally, no longer allowed in the celebrations November, December?
Well, on the one hand, we can celebrate the ruling, but we have to be realistic. This was a kind of this lower court, and the anticipation of people of African descent in the Netherlands is that the mayor may appeal the ruling at a higher court.
Oh.
So this is being watched, but nevertheless, all people who have been involved in the debate and in the opposition feel that for now this is a victory.
Right. And your own personal feeling, yes, Professor, because I know, I can only imagine, the kind of pressure, the pressure that you came under. I don't even know how you stood up, but that was a lot of pressure. So you had to be very strong to withstand that. So your own response to this, is it a kind of a vindication in a way?
I feel that the heightened, well, first of all, I didn't start this. The working group didn't start this.
Yes.
Because for years, people have been complaining. But I don't think it ever went international. But several things happened, I believe, that brought the heightened awareness internationally.
Yes.
One, a young black man called Quincy Garrow wore a T-shirt marked "Sorta Pete is racist." He was allegedly assaulted by the police arrested. Later on, I'm told the police apologized to him. But that brought a heightened awareness. People were outraged that this could happen. So that happened. Then the United Nations allegation letter went. And third, I gave an interview. The reason that I've come under extreme attacks and hostilities that I was chair of the working group. And because I'm chair of the working group, I was chair of the working group at the time, they called and interviewed me.
Yes.
So I was I first of all, I gave the view of the working group, and then I gave my personal view. And it outraged the people of the Netherlands, and I got, I don't know how many thousands of mail from people in the Netherlands. They took out a Facebook page. In 24 hours, 2 million people had signed a protest against me, my remarks, and urged the government to keep the festival. And then something else happened recently. A qualified young black man applied for a job in the Netherlands, and a private email commenting on the application and saying they didn't want any black people in this post was mistakenly included in the reply to the young man. So all of these things happened almost at the same time or in close sequence.
Yes.
And heightened the debate over Black Pete. And I think because the media in the Netherlands publicized my interview so widely, other people began to pick it up. Therefore, if you go on the internet now and just Google Black Pete or Vereen Shepard, you'll see that this has been picked up all over the world.
Yes.
I don't know how many
all over
requests for interviews I got, and even press in the East, in Asia.
Yes.
Now, what has also gone global is this court ruling, reports on this court ruling.
Yes.
So everybody is talking about this. And so I think the working group played a part, and personally, I feel, I feel good that we're not just a working group, making, safe statements because we don't want to come under attack. But we actually stood for something. When you stand for something, when you put yourself out there, this is going to happen.
Correct.
And we are on a country visit right now to the Netherlands, including the kingdom, parts of the kingdom. That's why I'm in Curacao.
Yes.
And I'm just coming back from the Netherlands on my way back to Jamaica. And I have to thank this, I got a lot of support within the Netherlands. I was mobbed by the press, of course, and I had to get police protection while I was in the Netherlands. So it's been a good trip in the sense that we realized that we have created along with the individuals who were protesting before, we have helped them, in their view, we have helped them to bring international attention to this, and this is a victory for everybody involved.
I really do believe that. We're going to go live to the Netherlands right now, Vereen. So thank you very much for this, and keep up the good work. I know exactly how difficult it is for you in whatever chair you're sitting to face some of the backlash, but you do that understanding that there's something greater than fear, and that is courage.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And the civil society groups we met, and the overwhelming, I didn't realize I was so recognizable in the Netherlands.
Yes.
And, that was scary in some way, but also uplifting in other ways. So, it's all good, I believe, and I think we have ushered in intercultural dialogue and debate, and the ruling has called for a relook at this practice, and as the lawyer, Frank King, who was involved, who represented the complainant, said, this could be the start of change. So let us see what will happen.
Of course. Thank you very much, Professor Vereen Shepard. Talk to you when you come in. Yes, thanks much.
Great.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right, Professor Vereen Shepard there. She is in Curacao, and as you heard, responding to the Dutch court's ruling that Black Pete is indeed a negative stereotype. We're going to be going to the Netherlands to speak with Aldith Hunker, who is a journalist in the Netherlands and has been following this. If you recall, the last time we spoke to Professor Vereen Shepard about this issue, we had also linked with Aldith Hunker in the Netherlands to gauge the response of persons on the ground. Once again, we're going to be doing that. She's joining us by phones right after this.
Western Union, moving money for better. The time by Western Union is
now 9:40, and still to come inside of the program. The bottom line this morning, the bottom line is entitled Critics, Not Criminals. And we're looking at press freedom and freedom of speech in Jamaica. And I'm contextualizing that within my own personal experience as an advocate and activist and justice journalist who has come under pressure from politicians and agencies and so on and so forth, and their cronies. And so, I thought freedom of expression is a requirement for the very existence of democracy. So let me no longer do this in silence. Let me no longer deal with this silently. Let me just put that out there. All right, so we're standing by to speak with Aldith Hunker coming up.
Uniting the African family for development.
All right, back with you on email. Oliver Noel says, Tendai Mori, my sister, greetings. Do you know that the British have a day they celebrate called Darky Day? Give thanks, Ras Jamani. I didn't know. And we also have a blackface here in Jamaica, Del Cita. And we have to discuss Del Cita. We're going to have to stop and talk about Del Cita. No, it is the truth. We have to. It is a blackface. What else is Del Cita? Blackface. And so at some point, we are going to have a conversation about that, because that blackface is a racist image. It is stereotypically racist. And that happens here in Jamaica. On the Jamaica media, I've heard Professor Vereen Shepard made reference to Del Cita also. But I think that we really do have to sit down and have a conversation about that. And we probably have to just start at Del Cita. Just saying. I know. I know. I can just hear the shock. Yes, I know. We have to talk about Del Cita. All right, we're standing by for Aldith Hunker in the Netherlands. Let me know what's happening with Aldith. And we see you tweeting, so we know you're around. We're just trying to make that connection, I think, phone line-wise, with the Netherlands. And just point to me, let me know what's happening. So the Dutch court ruled Thursday that Black Pete is a negative stereotype. Aldith Hunker live from the Netherlands on the phone lines. My sister Aldith, it's good to take you from the Twitter account to the phone lines, isn't it though?
Aren't we a technical bunch, Kabu? Good morning to you.
Yes. Morning to you, my sister. Good morning. All right, so I know you're listening online, so you'd have heard that conversation we just had with Professor Vereen Shepard. But first of all, give us a response to this ruling in terms of what the people in the Netherlands are saying and how they themselves are reacting to this ruling by the Dutch court.
Well, there have been different types of reactions, Kabu, and all equally emotional, I might add. On the one part, we have people who are really angry. They feel they haven't been heard, and they feel that Professor Shepard should have spoken with the Sinterklaas committee during her visit to the Netherlands. And social media, as you can well imagine, showed a new outpour of racist remarks. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, though, there has been some form of relief, if I may call it that, from those who have been ambivalent in the whole discussion from the start. Many of them now use the argument that not all traditions are good and compare the whole black issue with, for example, Sharia law or female genital mutilation, and saying to the people, well, those are traditions too, and we've revised them and we've moved on. Mm-hmm. And our Minister of Social Affairs, who is also the Vice Prime Minister, he has been on record saying that Sinterklaas celebrations should not be imposed top-down, but should from now on be a celebration for all Dutch people. Mm-hmm. And he met with Professor Shepard to explain the meaning of Sinterklaas to her. One thing that I should mention, though, there's a recent study by the University of Maastricht here in the Netherlands that has showed that the Netherlands, Finland, and New Zealand are the top 3 countries having problems with criticism from outside, especially on the issue of human rights. Because according to this report, those 3 countries feel they do enough, internationally speaking, to better the rights of humans elsewhere, and therefore they don't want to be criticized on domestic affairs.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you take that into account, the whole, the whole fuss about this Black Pete thing is maybe more about being criticized as a country from outside than about maybe changing that tradition, because I do believe we are moving this tradition. It's been, I told you when we spoke earlier in November, that Black Pete has taken on many forms in history. And this is just one of the new changes that will have to be made. And it will be made, whether on... Yes, sorry.
And you say it will be made, but and I was just going to ask, is there a danger then for fundamentalist kind of response to Black Pete in terms of those who oppose anyone from outside coming in to tell them what to do? Because you see, you talk about that the change that was happening.
Yes. Well, the changes that have been happening so far have been minor. So this would be a major change because... as our Prime Minister so finely put a couple of months ago, the name Black Pete means he's going to be black, right? Mm-hmm. So what I think Netherlands need to do is to really reconsider this whole character and change his name, because for one thing, the Netherlands is one of the countries that have the most nationalities worldwide. We have almost 200 nationalities living in the Netherlands. Yeah. So if you ask me what should be done, we should just change the Black Pete into a Pete and make him a Pete of Turkish descent or of Moroccan descent or of Dutch descent or of Caribbean descent, and have different Petes, so that we continue this celebration that everybody seems to love so much, and take away this sting that is this feeling of being left out by Black people, and a lot of white people too. I have to say, it's not just Black people who are protesting this Black Pete issue. It's a lot of white people as well. When they raise their voices, they are told that they are traitors by others, by people who are essentially racist, possibly. Yes.
So that Olive, in terms of a court ruling itself, I heard Professor Shepard just say that there is talk that there might be an appeal at certain levels. While the ruling has been made, from your reading of this, what does it mean essentially?
Well, in Dutch law, you always have the right to appeal to a higher court on any matter. So the mayor of Amsterdam now has 6 weeks to react to this ruling and to see what he will do about this the permit that he has to retract according to the ruling. To be honest, I really don't think that he will make a big fuss, because during last year's Sinterklaas celebration, he already made a slight change to the normal festivities when Sinterklaas arrived in the Netherlands. Because this discussion was already going on at the time, so he already made slight changes then. And a part of me believes that this whole fuss that we're in now is maybe even orchestrated, as if let's put it bluntly, Professor Shepard is being used as a sort of scapegoat or a sort of instrument to force this issue, to have somebody to blame that we will be changing this tradition, if you catch my drift.
Oh, yes.
I believe that there are more people willing to change this tradition than we read about in the newspapers or than we hear about on the radio.
So you're saying that there's more to this than meets the eye, because of course the group from the United Nations, which Professor Shepard chairs, I mean, they have been contacted. She's responding as a member of this group and responding in the name of this group and not in the name, the personal name of Vereen Shepard. So in essence, you're saying the United Nations is being used to drive a process of change that was in the plans anyway.
That is my personal look on the matter. Yes.
Okay. All right, my sister, thank you very much as usual. Really appreciate you coming
You're so
on.
welcome.
Yes, at such a short notice, but really, really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Anytime you need it. Thank you.
All right.
Have a nice day.
You too. All right, Aldith Hunker, the journalist extraordinaire in the Netherlands, and of course, We're going to keep following this one. Aldith is a CEO of Hunk Art for Global Freestyle Multimedia Journalism, and she also does moderating, media coaching and design, and make documentaries. Top journalist in benevolence here, Aldith Unka. All right, time for the bottom line. The bottom line is that as the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights Principles of Freedom of Expression states, freedom of expression in all its forms and manifestations is a fundamental and inalienable right of all individuals. It is an indispensable requirement for the very existence of democracy. An indispensable requirement for the very existence of democracy. However, as a practicing journalist here in Jamaica, I find that I have been questioning the extent to which Jamaica's politicians and their strong men and women recognize this tenet of democracy, and reflecting also on the lengths to which they will go to intimidate and in some cases attempt to criminalize speech, they themselves, of course, being the judge, jury and executioner. Just last November, advocates for freedom of expression everywhere hailed Jamaica in becoming the first independent Caribbean country to have no criminal defamation laws, including seditious libel, on the books. In fact, the International Press Institute noted that the bill represented great progress in Jamaica's democracy. The House of Representatives on November 5, 2013, passed the defamation bill, revamping the country's libel legislation. This came after years of lobbying by the media and civil society interests to overhaul Jamaica's libel and slander laws. The bill also promotes speedy and non-litigious methods of resolving disputes concerning the publication of defamatory matter. The new law replaced both the 19th Century Libel and Slander Act and the 1963 Defamation Act, and in addition to the repeal of criminal libel, the reforms included the elimination of the distinction between slander and libel, the reduction of the limitation period for actions from 6 years to 2, the replacement of the defense of justification within the defense of truth, the introduction of the defense of innocent dissemination, and a stipulation that damages shall be at the sole discretion of judges, not juries. Why then, as a practitioner, am I talking about criminalization of speech in Jamaica in 2014? First to say, I'm talking about it because of my own personal experiences with some politicians and their political cronies. But the bottom line is that the criminalization of speech in Jamaica doesn't happen through the legal channels as, say, in Egypt and Brazil, Gambia, Ukraine, the CAR, the Central African Republic and Pakistan and so on, where they drag journalists before the court and still throw them in prison. No, in Jamaica it is usually through threats, intimidation, exclusion and bullying. Nothing specific that a journalist can report, but overt enough to act as a warning and a deterrent to pursue certain lines of inquiry and critical thinking. To act as a warning and a deterrent to pursue certain lines of inquiry and critical thinking. The bottom line is that as a practitioner, we expect to be challenged, to be disagreed with, and even called out if and when we get it wrong. What we do not expect, and most certainly do not deserve, are thinly veiled threats and harassment from political supporters who have been egged on to do so when we speak out for justice. So that has led me to ponder on the question, is free speech in peril in Jamaica? This is a question which must be interrogated and answered, not within the context of tribal journalism, where practitioners are known or at least appear to be sympathetic to one political tribe or the other, but rather within the ambit of social justice, economic terrorism, and investigative journalism, in which journalists are brave and courageous enough to challenge the status quo, to challenge a prevailing political order, and to demand accountability from both tribal gangs, JLP and PNP. The bottom line is that we who are persuaded that the right to freedom of expression is essential for the development of knowledge and understanding among peoples must answer the question. We who are convinced that any obstacle to the free discussion of ideas and opinions limits freedom of expression and the effective development of a democratic process must answer honestly if freedom of speech is in peril in Jamaica. We who are convinced that guaranteeing the right to access to information held by the state will ensure greater transparency and accountability of governmental activities and the strengthening of democratic institutions are challenged to face a question that for the moment we have not contemplated. Considering that the right to freedom of expression is not a concession by the state but a fundamental right. We must not be afraid to speak truth to power. We must not be afraid to speak truth to power as critics, not criminals. We must do this in Jamaica today as practitioners, together, whether we are affected today or not. Understanding that we are critics, not criminals. For every journalist who endures harassment from political cronies in silence opens a door of intimidation, threats, and even murder wider and wider. The bottom line is that Journalism plays a vital role in the balance of power between a government and its people. When a country's journalists are silenced, its people are silenced. By protecting journalists, we protect freedom of expression and democracy. The bottom line is that we must be courageous in this regard. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is a recognition that something else is more important than fear. We are critics, not
I'm Asada Shakur. The first time I heard a tape of one of Mamia's radio broadcasts, it was the first time I fully understood why the United States government was so intent on putting him to death. I make a special appeal to you, sisters and brothers, to fight tooth and nail to save Mamia's life and to free him from the grips of his oppressors. As you honor our forefathers and foremothers, I urge you to honor our living heroes. When you honor the names of Nat Turner, Harriet Tubman, and Malcolm X, I urge you to honor the names of Geronimo, Jijaga, Sundiata Akoli, Mutulu Shakur, and Mumia Abu Jamal. I urge you not to forget and not to betray our living heroes. If we ignore their struggle, we are ignoring our own. If we betray our living history, then we are betraying ourselves. We could not save Malcolm X, but we can save Mumia. We can save him, and we must save him. Because we love our brother, and we need our brother to help us fight for freedom. Free Mumia Abu Jamal. Free all political prisoners. Let us carry on our tradition to freedom.
Yeah, man, this is Clive, a.k.a. Chris Zobo, you know. Well, you can give me a minute to make a talk to your listeners, them. Yeah, man, this, I talk to Muta listeners from Jamaica, US, Britain, and the world, you know. Especially the one them that on YouTube and Butte-based and Roman channel. You know, for over 20 years, Muta, I highlight problem them and I get solution. But, you know, I feel black people, but Muta alone can't do it alone, you know. But all we do, as them listening, we do talk and we complain amongst ourselves and pass blame and we the government, white man, rich man, and Jah and Jesus to solve them. Black people, if you know, say, and a responsibility that other people solve them problem, you know. And you know, say, the man we have been put by his neck, now take it off and let you lick it off and pump him in the face and stick in a thing short. Government has do good enough. Because you see them a drive Pajero and the regular artists, them alright, because them don't make it. And you see them a pop champagne, flat BMW, and a be a big mansion, but, you know, them not be no factory for employee. You know, the problem that I face working and poor class don't affect them. I can't believe how fool on the be, you know, they wait for same people who cause the problem to fix it. We complain about foreigner buy up Jamaica, but instead we buy up Jamaica, we buy up foreign goods. We don't know where nothing said and get the money from. I see your money when you buy them goods and use back and come buy up Jamaica to use against you. We complain about Monsanto, but we shop at the supermarket all the time. And we don't even try to create our own supermarket that we sell our own organic food. So we leave it up to them to solve our problem with them create. Marcus Garvey said, if you can't do what other races do, you don't deserve to die. And that is exactly what happened to me right now. If you can't own the wholesale like the China man, you don't deserve to stay poor and jobless. If you can't own the multinational like the white man, you will stay at the bottom of the political and economic system and big IMF. If you can't own the big farm like Monsanto, you deserve to die from cancer and death of famine. Muta give you no solution to your problem. But Muta, you alone don't have the money to solve the big problem, yeah. So if we put the money together, we can create the big man, big corporation, or big business that will represent our interests and agenda to work to solve our problem. I say, me don't say already, if 1,000 Muta listener put $1,000 US, that's $1 million US, 100 million Jamaica can set a foundation, start a business. We are going to invest in building and expanding black business like farm, supermarket, car creative, transportation, etc., etc., which will provide wealth and jobs amongst our own by ourselves. Talking and complaining is good, because they highlight the problem. But it's time to build business and structure to solve the problem that we complain about so much. Every race have them structures set up. That is why you can see Chinese come from China, set up shop, and stock it out with all Chinese need. All of that man know to do is just be a buyer. You can't even blame the Chinese, because they're not doing it for yourself anyways. My solution, I know the be all and all, but it's one thing that is in your power to do and can create a system that will outlast us all alive now, Muta is the only man in Jamaica I feel that is trustworthy. That is why I'm willing to invest $1,000 US in him to set up a business to build our system. There must be at least 1,000 of him listeners who believe in real self-reliance. If not, I guess that Jamaican is doomed to only be beggars. $1,000, I don't know, why? Because Jamaicans spend more than that on ganja, liquor, bleaching cream, clothes and car and big house, etc. Overconsumption. If you don't have 1,000, then you know what? Can't get 10 people to join you as one then. So I want all the serious Muta listeners them to email muta@irfm.net. Call up and tell them say, you're ready to invest in him to build a phone system. So that me want to the people in Muta.
Blessed man, give thanks. That's so serious. That's so